Okay, so I'm going to call this council and committee meeting to order. Madam Clerk, the roll call.
Your worship, all members of council are present this evening with the exception of Councilors Butler and Zanko.
Thank you. There is one announcement this evening, and that relates to the second public information open house meeting for the Crystal Beach Secondary Plan, which is scheduled for Wednesday, August the 28th, 2019, at the Crystal Ridge Community Center on Ridge Road South. The open house will run from 6 to 8 p.m. and will be used to identify properties that planning staff are considering for proposed changes. Proposed changes may include a land use designation change and/or a change in the zoning that regulates the use of the land. Maps showing which properties planning staff are looking at for modification will be on display. The open house will start, as I said, at 6 p.m. Planning staff will be providing a slide presentation at 7 p.m. A notice and maps can be found on the town's Crystal Beach Secondary Plan webpage, and the notice will be advertised in the paper and announced through all of the town's standard media and notification outlets. And if there is anyone who is in Crystal Beach and has concern about whether their property is potentially subject of rezoning, I would suggest that you take a look at the town's website or contact the town staff. Okay, there is no addendum this evening. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? There being none, there are no notices of upcoming public meetings. That takes us to corporate and community services, and just let me look at this. Yeah, that's supposed to be actually part of the consent agenda. Didn't pick that up. I think we're doing this because we wanted to have these delegations precede the public meeting. Yeah, okay. So, if you don't mind, Councillor Duvenel, I will just deal with these delegations. First delegation is James Brennan from Grant Thornton to talk about the town's 2008 audited financial report. Good evening, Mr. Brennan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors. Thank you for allowing me to present the auditor's report on the town's 2018 financial statements. Now, normally I would read the whole report, but I'm going to disappoint you and I'm not reading the whole report tonight for two reasons. One main reason is that the CPA Assurance Board has increased the size of the report. We're now into our third page. This is the second time they've increased the report in about the last 10 years. The reason they've done that is they've expanded the explanation of the auditor's responsibilities with regards to an audit. In response to users and readers of the financial statements still not quite understanding what our responsibility is, which is to report on the financial statements of clients. The other fundamental change they made is they moved the opinion paragraph from the last paragraph to the first paragraph. And that's the paragraph I'm going to read tonight because that seems to be the most important paragraph to most people. And that opinion paragraph reads, "We have audited the consolidated financial statements of the Corporation of the Town of Fort Erie, which comprise of the consolidated statement of financial position as at December 31st, 2018, and the consolidated statements of operations, changes in net financial assets and cash flows for the year then ended, and notes to consolidated financial statements, including a summary of significant accounting policies. In our opinion, the accompanying consolidated financial statements present fairly, in all material respects, the financial position of the Corporation of Town of Fort Erie, as at December 31st, 2018, and its results of operations, its changes in net financial assets, and its cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards." The entire report is duly signed by Grant Thornton LLP and it's dated July the 8th, 2019. And that's the extent of my report.
Mr. Brennan, I must say that you've outdone yourself. I was expecting a long, erudite rendition of the financial aspects of what's gone on in Fort Erie during the last year, but there may very well be questions by members of council. So I will ask them if they do have any questions. Councillors? I think we should just point out that there were two items that you found during the course of your audit that you had concerns about, both of which have been corrected by the municipality, one of which related to a inclusion of an asset in our books, which actually is owned by the region.
Yes, actually, management found that. And so because it was related back to when capital assets were first put on the books, a prior period adjustment was made because the number was material. And we audited that prior period adjustment, and we put an emphasis of matter in the audit report just to draw the user's attention that that was a prior period adjustment.
Thank you. Councillor Dubin, I'd asked if there were any questions of Mr. Brennan, and if there aren't any, you're good. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Brennan.
Again, thank you very much, and we'd like to thank the staff and Jonathan's team for helping us during the audit. It went very smoothly.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you. Good night.
That then takes us to the second delegation, Jody Shanoff, with respect to embryonics research, engagement in embryonics research. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors. My name is Jody Shanoff. I'm a vice president of consultation and engagement at Environics Research. We were recently engaged through the region of Niagara, through a working group of 13 CAOs to conduct public opinion research across the region with a representative sample of residents to understand what feelings and sentiment are out there in light of the provincial government's regional governance review that's currently taking place. There is a more detailed report that is available, has been made available to councillors. I will be speaking to just a subset of the data this evening. The data was also delivered earlier this month to a meeting of Niagara Regional Council as well. I'm happy to take all of the time that the auditor didn't take, or to be brief and succinct. So I will I'll walk us through. Starting with perhaps the most important part of the research, and that is the methodology, just to assure everybody of the steps that were taken to ensure that the sample overall is representative of the distribution of the population across the region of Niagara. We spoke to a total of 832 residents. You can see there how it is distributed among the 12 municipalities. Fort Erie residents represented 61 of the interviews in total. We set quotas to make sure that we had reasonable representation when it came to important demographics like age and gender, and where those might have been a little bit off through the telephone methodology, we then followed industry standard practices and applied weighting to ensure that overall the population in this survey is representative of the region. I'll also assure the group that 25% of the total sample was achieved through dialing cell phone numbers. That's more and more important these days to ensure that we get a random sample of people, many of whom no longer have landlines in their homes. So moving into the data, and I will be speaking to the data at a regional level, I can say overall that the residents of Fort Erie gave responses that were very much in line with the overall region. They didn't differ significantly from the overall averages that we're seeing here. But if there are any variances that are of interest, those are located in the larger report, or I can see if I can pull them out for you this evening. Overall, residents across the region feel well served by the two-tier system of government that's currently in place. 76% feel well served, whereas just under 1 in 5, so 19% feel not well served. Not a lot of significant demographic variations there, excuse me, with the exception of some residents over the age of 55 who tend to fall more into the dissatisfied categories. That's a theme we see in some of these questions, but it's also a theme that is often prevalent in any kind of citizen satisfaction research and is not an anomaly in this study. The effectiveness of the two-tier structure, and I'll just note that the question wording is at the bottom of each page, which is really important so that everybody understands exactly how these questions were posed and the kind of information that was provided to residents when they were asked. So setting aside their political views, did they feel as though the two-tier municipal system in Niagara region represents their interests? And again, overall, we see a majority of residents feel that yes, their interests are represented effectively. Just over a third, 35%, who feel that they're not represented effectively. When we probed a little further on what exactly made it an effective form of representation, overall, people felt they didn't have a lot to complain about. They'd never experienced any kind of service problems. There are other questions in the survey that indicate that people in general don't have difficulty navigating the two levels of government. That's in the larger report, consistent with the result we see there. And they feel a good sense of connection with representatives in their various communities and municipalities. The top response there, that 20%, those are people who felt that they were effectively represented, but they offered a caveat. And again, that is something that's quite typical in any kind of municipal or citizen-driven research. That's just, nobody's perfect. We wanted to get a sense of how people felt about the value they derive from their taxes paid at both the lower tier and at the upper tier regional municipal level. This is, again, a very standard breakdown and comparison of these two levels of government. Overall, 76% of residents feel as though they derive a good value for taxes that they pay at the lower tier, their local municipality, and only a slightly fewer, just over 2/3, feel that way about the taxes that they pay to the region of Niagara. I'll reiterate that when it comes to the town of Fort Erie, residents there give very similar responses and also in the same priority in terms of a little bit higher when it comes to their local municipality versus how they feel about the value they derive from the region. We then start to try to understand where, if at all, there's any kind of appetite for change when it comes to how municipal government is structured in the region. And so this first question probes to understand whether or not people prefer the current structure that's in place with two sets of municipal representatives for both the lower tier and the regional level of government versus one set of councillors who could represent both levels. And in this case, residents across the region were very split. When we take into consideration that the margin of error is 3.4 percentage points, 19 times out of 20, this is really it's a draw. People are very divided. In the case of Fort Erie, people lean more so towards a preference for the current structure, so two sets of representatives. They're at 61%, but it's given the size of the overall, the base size for Fort Erie, I don't want to over-represent that, but there is certainly indication throughout the data that the residents of Fort Erie are quite satisfied with what's in place now and consistent with what we're reporting overall. When we worked with the working committee of the 13 CAOs, our advice was don't execute a survey that asks people point blank, do they prefer amalgamation or what they have now? Because that would assume they know all kinds of things that have not been part of public discourse on this topic. So what we've done instead is tried to understand, and this is an approach we've used for similar studies in other municipalities across the province at this time, wanted to understand what the priorities are of residents across the region when it comes to the responsibilities of their elected officials and what they experience at the municipal level, and then get a sense of whether or not the current situation that they have in place now or some degree of change might better deliver on some of these responsibilities. So this first slide that you're looking at is just a straight up prioritization of what people across the region feel is important, what they're looking for from their local representation. Overall, and not surprisingly, residents prioritize the effective delivery of services. They want easy access to those services, and a strong sense of community is also very important to residents. And again, that's something that's consistent for the town of Fort Erie. And the priorities decrease. Following that, we move into the iteration of the question that I just hinted at. This is the language that they're presented with over the telephone, so everybody's clear on the wording. What we really wanted to do was try to simplify things as much as possible to give them a choice between no change, so the current structure with the 2 tiers, a little bit of change, or something that we described as partial amalgamation, with no detail beyond what you see there, combining some Niagara area municipalities into larger municipal governments, no specifics around that, beyond that, and then total amalgamation, or a lot of change, which would mean bringing all of the municipalities together into one. We then revisited those priorities that we just looked at. And what you see on this slide is how often those 3 scenarios were chosen for each of these priorities. And again, they're rated in descending order from what was determined to be of most importance to residents of Niagara. So in this case, the efficient delivery of services, which was the top priority. The plurality chose the current situation with 2 levels of government in the region. Overall, our assessment when we look at this slide is that in general there is a preference for the current scenario. There's a majority preference, certainly when it comes to the strong sense of community and belonging, and that's not a surprise, and having easy access to counselors when there's an issue or they're looking for some assistance. So those are the ones that rise to the top, but overall, the support for either some change, partial amalgamation, or a lot of change, full amalgamation, is quite limited and diffuse across those different areas of responsibility. We then went on to ask whether or not people had the impression that a bigger government meant an improvement to the delivery of service, since we know that delivery of service is a priority for residents across the region. And here we get a sense that in general, people anticipate that in fact the delivery of services, the quality of service delivered would decline. So we're looking at almost half, 48%. This division is almost exactly what we see in the town of Fort Erie as well. Residents here who anticipate, a plurality of whom anticipate that the delivery of services would decline in a situation where their municipality became larger than it is now. So just in conclusion, and again, these were thoughts that we delivered to Regional Council as well as to the working group of 13 CAOs. Overall, residents across the region, and this is the case in the town of Fort Erie as well, express confidence in the current state. They're comfortable, they feel effectively represented, they feel as though they derive value from their taxes, both at the lower tier and at the regional municipal level. There is some limited appetite for change, there always is. Anybody who's knocked on a door, not just at election time, would be open to having heard some pockets of appetite for change. The sentiment, however, and it's quite apparent in the larger report, is limited, especially when residents are faced with the possibility that the quality of services could decline under a larger government, or that their taxes might somehow be impacted by a change. And finally, there seems to be widespread belief that the current system that's in place is the one that is best suited to deliver on the responsibilities, in particular delivery of service and maintaining the character of the community. Any threat to those, the prospect of changes to the tax regime or impacts to the delivery of service are things that we see in the data suggest the region would hear quite vociferously from a number of residents that they're unhappy with that outcome if that's one that comes as a result of the government's current review. So those are the high-level findings from this report. Again, I direct you to the more detailed report that has been made available, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shanoff. We appreciate the information. Councilor Duguenel?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and through you, thank you very much for your presentation. I actually happened to see some of this back when it was presented at Regional Council and had an opportunity to look at it, and I really appreciate the work you've done kind of fleshing out all this information here to kind of see where residents feel in the region about the governance review and where we're going. I do have a couple questions, though. Just a few of them to set the record straight, kind of due to some of the narratives that have been out there, and some of them just for my own information. One of the most important ones, though, that I'm hoping you can clarify is we had roughly a little more than 800 people respond to this survey, and I've certainly heard some comments in the community that this isn't enough, that you're not talking to enough people. Could you just give us an idea just how many people are typically surveyed for a provincial or a national survey, and at what level do you need to have responses for them to be statistically significant?
Right. So there are a few factors that go into a sample being statistically significant. Typically, at a provincial level in Ontario, a sample of 800 or 1,000 is quite typical. Federal government studies, often the federal government will request a sample of across the country of 1,000 to 1,500 Canadians and consider that to be reliable results. Something I always tell any client is it's not just the size of the sample, but it's the reliability of the sample. And we go a long way to ensure that we use the gold standard methodology to collect the information. So it was by phone. Online surveys would not fare well in a region with a population dispersed like Niagara region. And just ensuring that we have obtained representation from all those important groups. And that happens through those age and gender quotas, as well as ensuring, ensuring that we have cell phone households that are represented as well. So it's not just the size. You can attribute a margin of error to a sample that's quite a bit smaller, but you always want to make sure that it is well represented of the entire population.
No, and I appreciate the information. So just if you could offer, certainly you're can offer an opinion favorable to the work you did, but considering we have a region with a population of just under 500,000 people, and we surveyed roughly 800, versus this typically being the size of a survey we'd see across a province of 14, 15 million people. Mm-hmm. Would you say you got a good cross-section and that you feel confident that this data does reflect the feeling of how residents feel in the region?
We do. We feel very confident, in particular because we're able to speak to younger households across the region. Again, it's those demographic groups, not necessarily the total number, but knowing that we made efforts to ensure that it wasn't all one type of person who was sitting by their home phone who were able to respond. We're very confident in the validity of the results in this study.
Excellent. And if I may continue, Your Worship, with another question. It's more related just to the breakdown through the municipalities. I mean, you gave the number, roughly 61% in Fort Erie are satisfied
61
with...
respondents.
60,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Overall, yes, 61.
We're satisfied with... I believe it was 61% were satisfied with the current two-tier structure.
61% prefer have the current structure of two levels of representatives for the two levels of government, as opposed to one.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we have that bit of information, but I'm just wondering, were there any municipalities in Niagara where there was a significant difference in feelings? Like, for example, I know there's been one municipality in the region that's been among their various discussions about one method, and then there's other methods that are kind of being talked about in others. Was there anything that jumped out at you of any municipality, of any preferences, any feelings, or is the region generally on the same feeling on the whole idea of the governance review?
So first of all, the topic of the governance review is not top of mind among Niagara region residents or any Ontario residents for that matter. People are not sitting at their dining room tables talking about it on a regular basis. That's very much inside baseball for the rest of us who are involved and touching it in some way. I would say, given the number of municipalities across the region, we were surprised that there wasn't more variance. There are pockets and hints In some municipalities in the region where there is talk of the four municipal
That's the one that I'm
solution.
thinking of specifically,
So in Niagara Falls then, for that example, there's a little more interest in when we did which of these models would best deliver. There was a moderately higher tendency among Niagara Falls residents to opt for that, which we attribute just in general to a greater level of familiarity. There's more discussion about it there, but it certainly wasn't overwhelming, and it was in line with, if not just a little bit higher than on average across the rest of the region and people's general preference for the current situation.
No, I appreciate your presentation and all the work you did. Thank you very much. Good work. Thank you.
Thank you to the presenter. Thank you for your presentation. I know that the survey was based on you asking the residents questions, but did the residents ask you a lot of questions in the course of the conversation? And did one stream kind of get repeated?
Residents did not ask questions, so the survey wasn't structured for that. There were a few open-ended questions, so typically in a survey there will be closed-ended questions where we give respondents the responses and they select one, and then there are the open-ended questions are ones where we say, why did you say that, for example, and they have an opportunity to give unstructured response. And so there were a few of those. But in general, no, there were not, and there weren't a lot of themes coming back that were consistent. Those open ends were typically in response to the previous close-ended question. So for example, how effectively do you feel represented? So among those who said, I feel effectively represented, we saw why. We asked a similar question of people who felt they were not effectively represented. It was a much smaller group, but they gave some responses that probably wouldn't knock you off your chair. They'd be pretty similar to what you'd hear elsewhere. So no, I wouldn't say that respondents, or that they typically would in the context of a telephone, went off script and had other thoughts or other things to contribute to this particular piece of work.
Thank you.
Any other councilors? Councilor Lubers.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Thank you very much for your presentation. Just to follow up on what you were just saying about feeling well represented in your area. I know that in the region, like Fort Erie, for example, we have a regional councillor and the mayor. So we have two representatives on council at the region level. St. Catharines has more. So when you were asking that question, did you break it down as to, well, St. Catharines is happy, but Fort Erie might not be? Is that broken apart, or is it just a general question?
So two answers to that question. In terms of how the question was asked of the respondent on the phone, you would have been explained as a resident of Fort Erie that this is what your municipal government looks like. You would not have been told what it looks like in St. Catharines. We would have explained in Fort Erie there are these number of councillors at these different levels of government. It would have been too much of a burden on respondents to explain what every municipality experiences, so we didn't go into that level of detail.
I understand that, but I think maybe you could go to the slide. I think that question was on one of the slides that you had, right? No, I think what my question is
In the full report, it is broken down by each of the 12 municipalities, if that's what you're asking. It's not in this abbreviated presentation, but in the larger report, we do have municipality by municipality analysis where you can see, and where it is statistically significantly different, that's called out. But in general, there were not huge statistically significant variances across the municipalities.
Well, I'll have to see that, because I know people that I talk to, in Fort Erie especially, they said, well, we only have 2 people on regional council.
So I'm
not as well represented as St. Catharines. They have more.
Slide 13 of the full report, I can tell you. So overall, the feeling of effective representation is 57% across the region, and it's 57% in Fort Erie as well.
All right. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Ms. Shanoff. Now,
pleasure.
in terms of your work is now completed with the CAO's initiative on the governance?
At this time, yeah, we're still, this kind of presentation is happening across other municipalities as well, but as far as being in the field and speaking to residents, there's been no further requests at this time.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Cookett, I don't know whether you've circulated the full report to all members of council.
I did late last week, yep.
Okay. That then takes us to a public meeting with respect to a property rezoning regarding Kimberly Alvarez, 4130 Erie Road. So this public meeting will be introduced, the topic will be introduced to council by Mr. Kernahan, member of town staff, who will give us some background. Then we will ask the proponent if she or her agent, Mr. Terrace, wishes to address council. And then after that, we will ask if there's anyone who wishes to speak in favor of the application. And then if there's anyone who wishes to speak opposed to the application. So Mr. Kernahan?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Good evening.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. This public meeting relates to an application for a zoning bylaw amendment that was submitted by Greg Terrace, who's the agent on behalf of Kim Alvarez for the property known municipally as 4130 Erie Road. Eating establishments, including outdoor patios associated with them, are permitted use at the subject property and on lands zoned like it is. The purpose of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment that we're speaking about this evening is to permit the development of an outdoor patio associated with an eating establishment which would contain 90 seats, whereas the zoning regulations would limit the capacity to 19 seats given the capacity of the inside of the eating establishment. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment would also permit the proposed outdoor patio that will include live and recorded entertainment to be located 22 meters from the nearest residential zone. Notification of this public meeting was provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act by placing an ad in the July 18th edition of the Fort Erie Post. In addition, residents living within 120 meters of the subject property were provided notice on the same date. This is an aerial photograph of the subject property as well as the surrounding area. Subject property is located in the Crystal Beach neighborhood at the northeast corner of Schooley Road and Erie Road. Land uses surrounding the subject property include the following. To the north is a vacant lot, which is also zoned Core Mixed Use 2. To the south is Erie Road, Bay Beach, and single detached dwellings. To the east is a vacant lot, which is also zoned Core Mixed Use 2. And to the west is Schooley Road and the Bay Beach parking area. This slide shows the site plan, or the proposed site plan for the subject property. The plan includes the construction of a ground-level outdoor patio, which would be made out of permeable pavers. That patio would wrap around the west and the south, or the left and the bottom side of the existing building. The proposed patio would have a maximum capacity of 90 persons and would also include a fountain. The existing building that includes a residential apartment above is proposed to remain and undergo renovations in association with the renovations that are proposed for the restaurant. The existing parking area to the east of the building is proposed to remain unchanged. The patio is subject to site plan control, which provides the town with the ability to control certain aspects of the development. These aspects include the provision of landscaping, the type of entertainment that can be provided on the patio, the hours when the entertainment can be present, and the requirements for landscaping, among others. The official plan designates the subject lands as core mixed use. The official plan designation permits the proposed restaurant, including the outdoor patio. As I mentioned, the subject property is currently zoned Core Mixed Use 2, which permits the proposed eating establishment and associated patio. The regulations for outdoor patios associated with eating establishments are included in the general provisions section of the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw. These general provisions limit the seating capacity of outdoor patios to a maximum of 50% of the indoor seating capacity of the eating establishment. General provisions also require a minimum setback of 60 meters from outdoor patios where entertainment is provided to the nearest residential zone. This setback is reduced to 20 meters if no entertainment is provided on the patio. The seating capacity currently of the inside of the proposed eating establishment is 38 seats. Therefore, the proposed outdoor capacity of 90 seats would exceed the zoning requirement. The outdoor patio, which would include live entertainment, is also proposed 22 meters from the nearest residential zone, which is located to the north of the Bay Beach parking area. The application for the zoning bylaw amendment proposes to change the zoning of the subject property to a site-specific core mixed-use zone with provisions to permit an outdoor patio that includes entertainment and a maximum of 90 seats located 22 meters from the nearest residential zone. This is a picture of the subject property looking east from Schooley Road. This is a picture of the subject property looking north from Erie Road. This is looking northeast from Erie Road, and in the foreground, in front of the building, is where the proposed outdoor patio would be located. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Very much, Mr. Kernahan. Any members of council have any questions? Councilor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. To you, to Mr. Kernahan. Mr. Kernahan, did the BIA, Crystal Beach BIA, have a chance to weigh in on this? Have they been sent any of this information?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, they weren't circulated on this application. They're not a regular agency that we circulate on zoning bylaw amendments.
And if I can continue, I think, if I'm not correct, we're talking about a minor variance, and it seems like it's more than a minor variance when you're going from, what is the normal distance? I think it's a.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, there are 4 tests that we go through, and we assess an application for a minor variance against. And you're quite right, this doesn't meet at least one of those, but in all likelihood, it's 2. And that's why we're treating it as a zoning bylaw amendment and not a minor variance. So the tests for the appropriateness of a zoning bylaw amendment are different than that of a minor variance, because a minor variance is by definition required to be minor, which is why it would be considered by the Committee of Adjustment rather than council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Noyes. Councilor Lubers.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop, and thank you very much, Matt. Just to follow up on your answer to Councilor Noyes, I think I read in the report that staff said they're treating this as a minor variance. Did I not read that in the report?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, it's being treated as a minor zoning bylaw amendment rather than a major zoning bylaw amendment. Staff do that when it's anticipated that there won't be a high level of public interest in the application. And in this case, that's been the case, at least from a staff perspective. We haven't received, we've received positive comments from the neighbors, but we haven't to date received any negative ones, so.
All right, and I guess my second question is, the BIA wasn't notified, and you said that they're not a partner or whatever it is when it comes to zoning bylaw amendments. And I'm a little confused as to why would the BIA not be considered a stakeholder in this? Because, my opinion, they would be more affected by anything that happens with zoning bylaw amendments in Crystal Beach than the EDTC would, and the EDTC was notified. Why is the difference?
But through Mr. Mayor, there are a list of people who are prescribed in regulation that we must circulate on zoning bylaw amendments. And there's also a list of people that are outlined in our department policies that we circulate on zoning bylaw amendments. In this instance, I followed the regulations and the policies. I didn't deviate from them as I wouldn't on any other one.
So I guess that's something that council will have to look at, because I don't know that I would agree that the BIA wouldn't be notified. I would think that they should be at least asked for comment. Anyway, thank you very much for your presentation. And if I may, Mayor
Sure.
Redekop, can you just give me a little better explanation about the setback? You're only mentioning the 22 meters. Now, it's supposed to be 30 meters, right? Setback from the nearest residential zoning, right?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, there are two regulations for setbacks that apply to outdoor patios. One is when no entertainment is provided,
Yeah.
which is not the case here, but just for clarification. When no entertainment is provided on an outdoor patio associated with eating establishments, the required setback is 20 meters from the nearest residential zone.
Yeah.
In this instance, the patio would meet that. It's about 22 meters from the, 23 meters from the nearest residential zone. There's a separate setback for when an outdoor patio has entertainment provided on it. That setback is 60 meters. And the applicant here has requested that they be allowed to provide entertainment on their patio, in which case the applicable setback is 60 meters from the closest residential zone. They've asked for an exception to that requirement.
And you don't think that going from 60 meters to 22 meters is major?
Through Mr. Mayor, I don't believe it would meet the test of a minor variance, which is why we're treating it as a zoning bylaw amendment. But
Okay, all right. Now, in a residential or any building, we have setback, side yard, rear yard. And for this application, that's the only setback that we're required is from a residential zone?
so through Mr. Mayor, this property is zoned core mixed use 2. The setbacks for buildings in core mixed use 2 are essentially nil, with one exception of the rear yard setback when it applies to, or when it's adjacent to a residential zone. That none of those setbacks are being violated by what is being proposed with the application. The application won't involve in, or it wouldn't permit the enlargement of the existing building in any way. It's strictly for the outdoor patio, and the required setbacks for that to property lines are nil.
That they can go right to the property line everywhere in Fort Erie?
Not everywhere, through you, Mr. Mayor, not everywhere in Fort Erie. No, this is in a core mixed use zone. The core mixed use zone is
Any-
reserved for,
any core mixed use in
Right.
Fort Erie can go right to the sidewalk or property line?
yes.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah, no problem. All right, thanks.
Any other counselors? We'll go back to Counselor Dubenow because he was first around. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Kernahan. Just really briefly, I know we're discussing the reducing the setback from 60 meters to 22 meters, so I'm guessing that's from roughly about 230, 240 feet to about, I'm guessing 80, doing math really, really quick in my head with the conversions. Now, with regard to the site plan control that would be required, you had mentioned about being able to control certain aspects. Would we be able to control exactly when live entertainment would be provided so that it's at hours where neighbors would not necessarily be disturbed at all hours of the night, so to speak?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, we can control precisely that thing, and we have in the past on the sanctuary property. We had a similar, or it was part of a larger grouping of zoning changes that it had to go through to get approval to be a brewery. And one of the things that we suggested and was done was to apply site plan control to do things such as that.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Counselor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop, to you, Mr. Kernahan. If this did go through, was there an option of going through the variance program, like the minor or major variance, or going to this bylaw amendment? Was there a choice?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, through informal consultation, when the applicant came to planning staff and presented us with their idea, we assessed it in our own minds and suggested that a minor variance wouldn't be an appropriate process for this. So we recommended that they proceed with pre-consultation on a zoning bylaw amendment. They are within their rights to apply for a minor variance if they had have wished, but our view was that this wasn't minor, so it wouldn't have been something we could have supported given the rules that we have for assessing minor variance applications.
I can continue, but they could have come through for a major variance, right? They would have had that option. I know that there's more money involved.
Through Mr. Mayor, I think we're mixing terminology here. Minor variance is different than a minor zoning bylaw amendment. So in this case, they are proceeding through a minor zoning bylaw amendment where the public meeting and a recommendation from staff occur on the same evening. Should council believe that this shouldn't be treated in that way, then they have the ability to direct us to proceed as if it were a major one. And that would result in a second meeting of council to make a decision on the application and a requirement for the applicant to pay an additional fee of approximately $4,900.
Not on that vein, but basically, I'm looking at this and on the, I guess it's page 8 of your report. You're talking about that if council doesn't agree with staff's recommendation, they would need to then get or hire a second planner or someone to look into this so that they could then have a report to go forth. Like, in other words, if we don't agree with you, then we have to hire somebody else, a planning consultant.
Well, that's the second opinion clause.
Yeah.
So basically, the position of staff is, and it's a policy that we've adopted, is if we're going to disregard what our planning staff is telling us, it would be prudent for us to have a planner on our side, because when it gets appealed to the OMB, we've got somebody other than our staff telling us that we're wrong, they're right. And of course, we're always right.
Yeah, understanding that, I'm just wondering, would the process have been any different if they went through, if they didn't go through the, and I get confused with the bylaw amendment and the variances. If they would have, if we direct them back to a major variance, like to go the other route, which I know is expensive, would the same clause have applied?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the second opinion clause is always applicable when staff are making a recommendation on a.
Just for clarification, if council decides that they need more information on any aspect of this application, we could request that additional information. There'd have to be a follow-up report from staff. The second opinion clause comes into effect if we get to a point where this council decides not to follow staff's recommendation with respect to a planning matter of this nature.
Thank you for that explanation. I'm concerned because of the amount of the change from 22 meters to 60 meters, which is about a 70% increase in the closeness to the residents. And I know this has happened in the past that, you know, the person who's doing it, wonderful guy or wonderful lady, no problems, promises us the moon, and then it's sold and the subsequent owner isn't as nice and isn't as courteous towards their nearby residents. But you're saying that we have ways to control that if it becomes a nuisance.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's site plan control is applicable to the property, and the agreement, the site plan are registered against the property. So they don't follow the owner, they follow the property. So our view is that measures can be put into place that would have the ability to mitigate negative impacts that could result. And that those measures stick with the property.
Okay, thank you.
Any other councillors? Back to you, Councillor Luberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Matt, I don't know if you would be able to answer this question, but in the report, they talk about they had an open house, which is not a requirement under the Planning Act. It's just courteous, right?
Through Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, there was a neighborhood information meeting, which is policy here at the town whenever there's a zoning bylaw amendment.
Would you know how many people they notified? Now, they did say that they sent out emails to residents within 120 meters.
So there was, my understanding is there was 72 residents living within 120 meters that were mailed notification.
All of them were emailed?
Mail.
Mail? Oh, I don't know, okay, I thought I read the email. Now, in the application, what you're saying is the owner can apply for anything they want. And this is in regards, I think, to the second opinion. What if council were to lower the number? Could you lower the number and without going to second opinion? Let's say, like, they're looking for 90. That's 4.5 times more than what they're zoned for. And, but what if the council were to come back and say, well, we can give you, they're allowed 19, I think. Well, let's say we had allowed 40. Could you do that without going through second opinion clause?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the second opinion clause is just a suggestion to council.
All right.
For any time they deviate from what staff's recommended, but it's not staff holding council to account, it's just a
But
suggestion.
could council go back and say, well, we'll approve a patio for 40, but 90 seems a little excessive?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if that's council's will, that they can modify the recommendation as they wish.
All right, okay, thanks.
Okay. I think the counselors have had an opportunity to question you, but I'm just wondering, I looked at the Appendix 2. I can't really determine what the actual dimensional size of this patio is. Do you know the dimensions? If you don't, I can ask the applicant.
0.3. Mr. Mayor, it's about 20 feet between the southern face of the building and the property line. And
That's right out in front, the part that's closest to Erie Road.
along Erie Road, that's correct.
That'd be 20 feet, and maybe another 20 feet when you get over to the side of the building.
It's just slightly more, yes.
Okay, so that could, well, they'll provide that information. And just trying to visually understand how large it is. I'm thinking it's probably about as large as the area behind you, where the seating is here in the chamber, but I'll clarify that.
So perhaps this photo would assist. It would essentially occupy everything from the face of the building to the sidewalk on Erie Road, and similarly on the sidewalk on Schooley Road, up to where the building juts out next to the garage there.
Okay, it does look like it's set back from the sidewalk, both on Schooley and on Erie. But again, that's something I can ask the applicant about. No, you'll get your opportunity. So I'd like to just kind of get to the philosophy of what's happening here. And we have a zoning bylaw. We have general provisions in the zoning bylaw, and those general provisions say that if you have an outdoor patio, the seating can't exceed half of your statutory allocated occupancy inside the building. I'm thinking that there's some type of reason for that. What is the reason?
So back in and around the early 2000s, there was an amendment made to our bylaw with the intent of keeping an outdoor patio ancillary to the indoor use. That's the intent. And I would suggest to you the major reason why this couldn't be processed as a minor variance is because it doesn't meet the test of being consistent with the intent of the bylaw. In fact, the intent of this establishment is to be primarily an outdoor establishment and not an indoor one.
So, all right, so that's a philosophical point that wasn't raised in your report. So aside from the occupancy and the setback reduction, there's now the fact that this is really the primary use of the property, not an ancillary use.
That's true.
So I'm thinking as well that the primary use of this type of establishment would have washrooms, as an example. I presume that there are washrooms in this building. Do you know how many washrooms there are in this facility?
I do not.
Okay, let me just, I'll finish with you.
Yeah, fair
They'll
enough.
get their opportunity. And so I'm thinking that the capacity must have something to do with the ability to accommodate patrons who have to go to the washroom.
So there's a separate capacity issue that relates to the building code, and that's where occupancy and washrooms are tied together. That type of thing is reviewed at the site plan and building permit stage. But
Well, just correct me if I'm wrong, but if we were to approve the recommendation of staff, we would then be approving 128 people utilizing the washrooms in this building, would we not?
subject to site plan approval and building code review.
So the site plan approval could include additional washrooms?
Yes, and so too with the building permit requirement when they renovated the building. This, sorry.
So if we do that, doesn't that reduce the size of the space that could be occupied by patrons within the building, which would then even further alter the ratio between inside and outside?
The proposed zoning amendment is worded such that they would have approval for 90 patrons outside. It's not written as a ratio. So that ratio may change if a portion of the inside of the building was reduced, the capacity was reduced by washrooms, but this zoning amendment is specific to a number, not a ratio.
I noticed that the regional planning department was asked for comment, and they had no objections. And it may be that the regional public health department isn't typically asked for comment with respect to this type of application. In this case, was the public health department asked for comment?
No, the region is a one window. Our regional planner is our one window to the region, and that's who was circulated. The comments we got back didn't reflect that the public health department had been.
Right, so we don't know whether the public health department saw this or not. So again, on the other aspect of this, which relates to the setback, I'm thinking that when the general provisions of the zoning bylaw were implemented, there was some consideration given to why 60 meters from a residential zone.
Mr. Mayor, I've reviewed the staff reports that were completed during that time. They were a little more vague than they typically are today. So I don't know what the philosophy of 60 meters, that quantum was, but the intent was to limit nuisance. I can tell you that much.
I've got some questions that I think I can ask of the applicant, and then there's some further questions that I think I can ask when we get to dealing with the report itself. Thank you very much, Mr. Kernahan.
Thank you.
Okay, so now if the applicant or someone on behalf of the applicant would like to address council. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you.
Can we have your name
Yes,
for the record?
Sure. Greg Terrace. I'm a senior planner with Urban and Environmental Management. I'm the agent for the applicant, Kim Alvarez, who is also with us this evening. I'm not going to repeat the presentation that Mr. Kernahan made. He did a good job, I think, explaining what we're proposing here. I just wanted to touch on a few things relative to the application. First of all, this location has operated in the past as a food establishment, and the core mixed-use zoning does allow the patio as a permitted use in conjunction with a restaurant. As you know, we're asking for additional seating capacity and to be able to provide entertainment on the patio. The proponent here wants to establish a year-round restaurant at this location. And in order for this to be viable, the proponent needs to take advantage of the influx of tourism in the area during the summer months. This includes the peak July and August season, as well as the shoulder seasons from mid-May to in June and September to mid-October. And these will be weather dependent on whether the patio operates in these off-season shoulder seasons. The hours of operation are anticipated to be Sunday to Thursday to 10 p.m. and Friday and Saturday until midnight. With respect to entertainment, I just want to clarify some things here. What the proponent is asking for is to have recorded background music playing for the enjoyment of their patrons, both in the restaurant and in the patio. The music will be at a level that will provide background entertainment, but patrons can still continue to carry on conversations. With respect to the request for live entertainment, the proponent is only considering perhaps once a month trying live entertainment, such as on Canada Day or the civic holiday, possibly Labor Day. It's not something that's looking, to have every week or every day. It's just occasionally, because honestly, having live entertainment is a cost to the proponent and really is not something that's going to bring a lot of additional patrons to the patio. The occasional use might do that, but ongoing will really just be an added expense. The proponent is aware of the town staff's recommendation to limit the hours of entertainment from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. We would respectfully request council to extend that time of entertainment to 10 p.m. Again, for the background music for the enjoyment of the patrons. And this would really not be unlike other Fort Erie restaurants and patios in tourist areas where they have live entertainment even later than 10, sometimes 11 p.m. or later. And there's already a number of locations in Crystal Beach that from time to time do have live entertainment. Importantly, we'd also like to reiterate to council there's a considerable support for this proposal. As was mentioned, an informal public open house was held on July 16th as a requirement of the planning application process. 2 neighbors attended and spoke in favor of the application, and no one was opposed. All property owners within 120 meters were notified, and that was 72 people notified by mail, and that list was provided by the town, and the proponent was responsible for sending out that notification and showing the town that that was done. An email letter was received by the proponent from their neighbor in support of the application and proposal. The neighbor indicated to the proponent that they sent this to the mayor and ward councillor, and a copy was provided to the town clerk today, who has distributed that letter. This weekend, the proponent also undertook a survey of visitors and residents. Approximately 65 residents in the immediate area were contacted and asked if they would be in support of this proposal. And attached, again, sent out by the clerk, was the results of that survey. Similarly, visitors were approached in the area and asked if they would be in support of a restaurant patio establishment as something that would be available to them in the future. And as you can see from the comments that were provided, it was very supportive. And I won't go through all these comments, obviously, but I just wanted to highlight, again, from the visitors, a number of comments. Patio would be awesome. Patio restaurant ice cream stand would be awesome addition. Love it close to the beach. Really good idea. Nice to have a restaurant across from the beach. Good luck, best wishes, as a number of things. Be really good to have a restaurant. Hopefully can have more restaurants. So as you can see, very supportive, and you can see the comments from visitors. Similarly, residents were very supportive of this. We'd love to have this restaurant. I'm looking forward to it. My vote is yes. And, you know, music not too loud, and we're respectful of that. We really want this restaurant, great for Crystal Beach. Music not loud and late, great idea, looking forward to it. Great idea to have a restaurant, a new restaurant, a great addition to Crystal Beach. So again, many residents in the immediate area very supportive of the application and what's being proposed. We also would like to consider the current Crystal Beach secondary plan process that's going underway. And looking at some of the material that's on the town's website, there's a lot of support for you know, Crystal Beach and in terms of having more restaurants, year-round restaurants, attractions for tourists. So again, this fits in the kind of vision that the Crystal Beach secondary plan is promoting from current input that it's received. So that essentially is our presentation with respect to the application. We look forward to council's consideration of our application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Terrace. Members of council, Councilor Duvenel.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and through you, thank you very much for that information you just provided. I'm just curious, there had been mentioned that only 2 people had showed up to the open house, but you had mentioned some comments there. Do you have an idea of how many people were in favor of this in the written comments that had been provided to you that you just read off?
All of the survey comments were in favor of it. There was, other than a couple that mentioned that they didn't want to have loud music, but there was 65 nearby residents and close to 100 visitors that provided comments.
So 165 people provided written submissions saying that they were in favor of this, and no one came out in any of the written submissions and said they were against this idea?
Not of the surveys, not of the people that were surveyed.
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Yes.
Any other councilors? Councilor Luberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop, and thank you very much for your presentation. And I don't want you to get me wrong that, you know, I'm against, you know, any development down there in the corner, but we have some rules, right? And you are allowed to have a patio. But what we allow and what you're asking for, there's a big difference. And that's where the problems set in. And you say that your client is not planning on having bands on a regular basis, live entertainment on a regular basis. But I would have to ask our planning department if that's something that we could put in on a stipulation that it could only happen, say, 3-4 times a year. I don't know if we could do that. And I know the intent is not to do it, but if it becomes very successful, I know what success does. It creates more and more of the same. And I'm not saying that would happen, but we have to look at that. And but would your client be opposed to being limited to the amount of live entertainment that they would bring to the patio?
I would like to at least turn to my client and ask, sure, it's probably better that I don't say something that she disagrees with here.
Good evening. No, I have no opposition. The music was actually an afterthought more so than actually having the ability to have capacity to have seating. So it was more that I've seen it across. It's actually happening now already at the establishments that they're playing outdoor music right now on patios across Erie Road. They're just not actually applying for any approvals. Okay, so it is already happening at all the existing patios across Erie Road. So that's all I would have thought would be nice to have is some quiet music, dinner music when you're listening, sitting at a patio. The idea then I thought, well, maybe on Canada Day when it's, a celebration and so forth, we're across the beach And I thought it would be very, like, more fun, because that's what a lot of people say, there's not that much to do. And I assume that that's not going to bring additional capacity, people to our patio. It's actually going to be, they'll probably be sitting in the park or sitting, you know, across the street on a bench, listening to the music, right? And I don't even know, the city may choose to do something like that on Canada Day. When they had their opening day, they did music as well. So anyway, that's, I have no, issue with actually having restrictions related to the music.
All right, thank you,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Okay.
And if I may, Mayor Redekop, you said that the intent is to operate year-round. And I don't have the slide in front of us now, but there was a slide with the, that shows the building, the west side of the building. And there was an addition to that building. There's like a little roof on it. Is that all heated to accommodate year-round use?
The year-round use would basically be inside the restaurant
Right, yeah.
in the off-season. So there is an inside component that is heated and would be the restaurant. That's
Yeah, is that heated now? You would have to
yes.
put additional equipment to heat it, right?
Well, it's heated. It's an indoor restaurant currently. Like there's seating inside.
All right,
Yep.
okay, all right. I guess that's all. I'll wait till the report comes up, and then I have some questions on the report.
Okay, Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Mayor Redekop, to you, to the presenter. I'm looking at your survey, and I think it's great. It looks like there's a lot of enthusiasm there, but it also says only sign it if you're in support. So I don't think anybody who would not be in support would be signing it, because it tells them not to. But that's neither here nor there. Are there renovations planned for this site, and are they extensive renovations? Do you guys have a kind of a dollar amount that you're thinking of putting into refurbishing this building?
Again, I'll ask Kim to come up because she'd be more familiar with what she's proposing for her actual building.
So for the frontage, we would like to obviously make a stucco front, improve the door, put an awning that used to be there, replace that. And obviously then the patio, to have the patio. I would like to actually put some greenery and so forth, and we've planned some potting and stuff on the patio, some artificial palm trees and so forth. So aesthetically, it will look a lot better. In terms of renovations, that back part of the building is actually residential above. Then it's over a garage, and there's some like kitchen in the back on the right side of the building. So that little part that's in the front that juts out is primarily the dining area for the restaurant. So it's quite small unless I actually built up or expanded off to the right side or something. So it isn't easy to actually expand that building to make it year-round and have a bigger, without substantial cost. Maybe $200,000 to do that or something. So it would just be like general renovations, improvements, and so forth to try to make it more aesthetically appealing.
Thank you for that. A few more questions in regards to the parking, and you didn't answer one of my questions. Are the residents that live upstairs? What's going to be happening to their parking spaces and the parking spaces for the approximately 128 people that are going to come? Where are they going to park?
So there's 5 parking spaces along the side, and actually there's, my understanding is, maybe Matt can actually clarify this, commercial, I think, down in Crystal Beach isn't required to actually provide parking. I'm not sure if that's correct, but so we will still be keeping our 5 parking spots on the side for them, and then there'll be street parking and so forth. And after 6, it's free on the street at 6 p.m. on Schoolie, and so.
And again, the mayor asked a question about the bathroom. What's the
Yeah, we have, so we did the pre-consultation, and it was with Matt, Jeremy, and Keegan. And Keegan was the building permit person, and he actually he sent me the information on what was required with the bathroom requirements, and we meet the requirements to be that size. So we have two water closets for men, male and female.
And I guess my last question is about accessibility. Will the patio be accessible, and does it need to be?
The patio will be accessible, but we don't have accessible washrooms. But as I think what happened in San Vito's, they were grandfathered because they didn't obviously have the ability to actually make it accessible. So yeah, we don't have accessible washrooms. And I don't think, because we're not renovating in terms of our inside, I think it gets grandfathered, is my understanding.
Okay, you may be correct. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
Thank you.
okay.
Any other councillors? Councillor Lewis?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Reddecup. Just to follow up on that, I know that they weren't required for washrooms, but I'm just wondering, or for accessibility, but I'm wondering if we can ask Matt if he said something about this would require site plan agreement, and would that be something that would have to be added, like accessible washroom?
You can ask Mr. Kernahan when we get to the report.
Oh, all right, okay, all right.
Any other councillors? So, Mr. Terrace, just to go back, what are the dimensions of this proposed patio?
Excuse me for one moment, I'll get that. The patio is approximately 1,600 square feet, so along Schooley Road, approximately 40 feet. And then on the north side, approximately 30 feet. And then the main part of the patio, again, 40 feet, and then it narrows down to about 20 by 20 feet in the southeast part of the patio. I don't know if the drawing, it's, or in meters, 97.5 square meters. Yeah,
It's easier for me to conceptualize it.
feet, yeah.
So, I don't know exactly what the size of the room
From
here
here
is,
is?
immediately behind you to the front wall, from wall to wall, but I'm thinking it's probably around this
This
size.
area, yeah.
And there are 75 seats here. The bench seats, which accommodate people, and then the seats that are arranged around the back. So that's 75, and we're talking about 90 in a approximately similar size space. So I think your client indicated that 2 washrooms for the men, 2 washrooms for, or closets for the men, 2 for the women, that's adequate for
38. That's what,
128 people.
right, I was not involved in the pre-consultation at that point, so I'm just relying on their, what was said at the pre-consultation meeting by your building official.
Right. And you mentioned about the music, and other patios in town have music. I'm presuming that some of them have the appropriate setbacks?
I would assume I didn't look at at those to see what their setbacks were.
And you or your client wouldn't have had any contact with the public health department about the washrooms or what have you. And I noticed that in the list of, as Councillor Noyes has pointed out, the survey does say if you support, so it would be hard to imagine getting people who didn't support. But some of these people don't live all that close to the property. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So some of them live some distance, maybe a couple of miles away. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So at this point, I'll ask if there's anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of the application this evening. Not the owner. And, okay, if there are none, then I'll ask if there's anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the application. There being none, then I'm going to declare this public meeting closed. And this is on this evening's agenda for council to deal with it's way down the agenda. Okay, so I think what we'll do at this point is start in with the consent agenda. Are there any counselors who wish any of the consent agenda items removed from the package? Counselor McDermott.
Yes, I'd just like to ask a question on 8.2.
Okay, do you want,
CAO 21-20.
you want it removed from the package, or do you want to just ask questions? Because you can do that without removing it. Yeah, okay. So before we get there, are there any reports that anyone wishes removed from the consent agenda? If not, Councilor McDermott.
Yes, Your Worship. In light of a lot of the social media stuff with regards to physician recruitment that I've seen, I just was wondering if I could bring Joanne up to the podium and ask her a specific question.
Sure.
So we've done a lot of work over the last couple of years with regards to recruiting doctors. And I just want you to take us back to last year with how many doctors, how many people without doctors did we have?
Sure. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor McDermott's question. This time last year, we had a total of 10,127 citizens who were not registered with a local family physician. As of June 30th, 2019, we currently have 2,924 residents who are not currently enrolled with a family physician. So we have, in the past year, been able to enroll almost 8,000 people with a family physician.
If I may continue? I would think that in any community that had the problems that we were having recruiting doctors, this would be an incredible task that you've accomplished up to this point. And could I gather from what we're about to do in Ridgeway down the line here that this could even close that gap even further?
Through Your Worship to the Councillor's question, yes, that is our goal, is that every citizen in the town of Fort Erie have the opportunity to roster with a family physician, and that is an enrollment model. So both of those physicians will be enrolling patients very soon.
Those are my questions, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councilor McDermott. Any other questions? Councilor Noyes.
Thank you. On the same report, and I had a chance to talk to Joanne earlier today, you're talking about a $10,000 limit, and I think I was concerned that if you had 10 doctors and each asked for a $10,000 limit, then we're talking 100,000, and you were going to make some changes to that.
Through Your Worship to Councillor Noyes, yes, I think we could amend that to say, I think we discussed per practice or, yeah, so that it's not, as we discussed, one physician hopes to have an audiology program, another physician hopes to have, as what would be appropriate per practice to be considered, and maybe put a cap on that. We can amend that.
Thank you for that explanation further. In a lot of this, the money is going towards purchases of equipment. And I know in the one situation with the ophthalmologist, we talked about that the equipment had to stay in Fort Erie. And that, if it was ever sold, then the proceeds would come back to the town. Would that be in every contract for any equipment that we're going to be recommending in the future for doctors when they request?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Noyes, yes, each agreement will be tailored to that. All of the equipment must be new, all of the equipment must stay with the practice, and the goal would be that we continue the service irregardless of the person performing that service.
If I can continue, I've had some feedback from various business owners that are not doctors. And they have expressed some concern that if they needed a piece of equipment or they needed to attract staff, that the buck stops with them and they can't go to the town and ask for the dollars. And I've explained to them in my words that we need doctors, we need to get them and retain them, and this is a very competitive market, and if we didn't do this, we wouldn't have that. But perhaps you could explain it better than that.
Sure. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Noyce, I think that if we're looking at providing services, clinical services that are covered through OHIP, that every citizen has a right to under the Canada Health Act. Ophthalmology falls into that. That is an OHIP covered service, and so therefore every citizen has a right to those services, and the goal would be to deliver those services locally. Every physician that's providing a service, again, it's through an OHIP billable number. So some of those other services that people are asking about, while they're very necessary and they're wonderful to have, it's not something that's covered under OHIP, and it is private enterprise.
One further question. I know we always talk about physician recruitment, but I think the other side of the coin is retention. And have we lost, I know Councillor McDermott talked about how many people we are now covering. I think it's wonderful that you've gone from 10,000 to 2,000. I mean, that's a 80% improvement in regards to the people who are now being serviced. But have we lost any doctors?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Noyce, we had 12 signatory physicians this time last year. We now have 15 signatory physicians. So a signatory physician is someone that can enroll patients, so it's not a walk-in model. Some of these just doing a few shifts to have people walk in. So the goal would be to have signatory physicians who are easier to retain. It's a better fit for the community. It's a long-term commitment to the patient. So now that we are much better aligned in having folks rostered to a physician, the goal will be to work on succession planning, as we do have a high propensity of physicians over the age of 60 nearing retirement. So the goal will be to look at succession planning, and some of those physicians have very large practices, so you wouldn't necessarily replace them with one physician. So it'll be to delve into that a little more deeply. And again, we're looking at models that are good patient care and drive us into healthcare reform. Primary care reform is coming in 2021, so we want to make sure that we're well positioned for that reform for our physicians and for our citizens.
One last question. If we weren't investing in our doctors, which in a sense is investing in our residents' care, how successful do you think we would have been? And I know it's pretty hard to estimate what would happen, if you didn't do something, what would have been the outcome, but.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Noyce's question, that's tough to say, because I think at the end of the day, it's not just about money, it's about finding the right fit, the right physician for that right group and for the community. So it's getting a handle on who is out there, knowing who's coming up the pipe, who's graduating, having a really good relationship with the medical school and with the Rural Ontario Medical Program. So it's very involved. I think to say that if we weren't dangling that carrot in front of them, they wouldn't come isn't very fair, because I'm not sure but I think it does develop a relationship of trust and commitment of this council to the physicians, and I know that they feel that. So I think that's an important component of it. It's a partnership.
Any other councillors to this report? Councillor Luberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekup. And I guess that, what I'm looking for more is just some verification on the process. And on page 4 of the report, we talk about the recruitment, and under process, third paragraph, it explains that the staff will review the request from a recruit, and then if it's eligible, then they would submit the report. But then it goes on to talk about if council refuses, does not approve, right, then the recruit can appeal the decision. And I'm a little confused as to how you would get to that point if at the beginning of the process they were eligible. How would, and why would a recruit be able to appeal a decision that, you know, in all intents, they're not actually entitled to anything in the beginning? doctor just to recruit? How does that come?
So what this says is that the applicant would file their application. If staff says they're eligible, they'll move it forward for council to determine whether to fund or not fund. But the part where that starts to break down in my mind is this notion that if council refuses it, there's a right of appeal.
Through you to Councilor Luber's question, I think it was that if they wanted more information, there might be a misunderstanding. Sometimes with physicians and the way they practice medicine, it's difficult to have there's so many different models of practice and models of reimbursement that if it was for more information, that they would be able to provide that information and take it further, rather than just be a simple no, that they would be able to come and perhaps themselves and discuss it.
So it's not actually an
No.
appeal, it would be more of, they would have.
Further consideration.
Come back with additional information.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, all right. And then, the next paragraph, when they're requesting, funding, if part of the funding is to purchase equipment, they have to purchase new equipment. And, the only reason I'm bringing this up is because I know there was a doctor here in Fort Erie that had another doctor who was gonna come in and take his practice over, and he was willing to sell him everything in the office, right? All his equipment that was in the office. And the new doctor was told, no, you can't buy used equipment. You have to buy new. And I find that kind of odd. Why would we not allow a new doctor coming in to replace a retiring doctor to purchase? And why would we not? Why would he not be eligible for some funding to help him out?
Through you to Councilor Luber's question, I think it comes down to culpability. To if medical equipment has very different standards and they have to be inspected by a biomedical engineer, and if the council is going to approve the purchase of equipment, it would be in the best interest of council that that equipment be new. If the physician chose to purchase used equipment, by all means, that's their money. They could purchase the used equipment. They do purchase used equipment all the time. But I think it comes down to the nature of the equipment and does it meet current best practice standards? Has it been inspected? And is it going to...
The answer to Councilor Luber's question is if a new physician comes to town, he or she may qualify for funding from the municipality. What they do with that money, such as purchase the equipment of a doctor who's retiring, that would be up to them.
Correct.
So they could theoretically.
Sure they could.
Your scenario.
Yeah, but they couldn't use any of the funding that we provide, like, and that to me,
No, that's wrong. So if we give a physician $100,000 or $70,000 or $80,000, which we've done in the past, if they want to use that money to purchase the equipment of a retiring doctor, that's up to them. We're paying them to come to town, and they commit to come to town for a certain period of time. Could be 5 years, something of that nature. What they do with the money, pay out their student loans, purchase new equipment, purchase used equipment, that's up to them.
well, that's not what the report says. It says that if the funding request is related to equipment purchase, the equipment must be new.
But the funding request that I'm talking about would be for the physician to come to town.
Yeah.
So when the municipality gives him money, what he or she does with the money is up to them.
That's right, yeah.
So they could theoretically buy the used equipment of a retiring physician. But we're not going to finance that directly. We'd do it through funding the physician to come to town.
Yeah, but, okay, let's look at the chart on how much would we fund a physician to come to town. Where is that? I think we've seen it here somewhere.
I think they're two separate issues. Through you, Mayor, to Councilor Luber's question, I think that the intent of it was that, for instance, if we were purchasing, if the request came in to purchase ophthalmic equipment, that equipment that that request would be for that equipment, but that equipment would be new. If a request came in for an incentive for a new ophthalmologist, and we gave money for a new ophthalmologist, that ophthalmologist could choose to purchase whatever they wanted to purchase with that money. But if the request comes in for equipment, then it's in the best interest of council for that equipment to be new.
Well, I understand it all, but now I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, we just gave Dr. Teal $100,000 for some eye equipment. And we stipulated that if she ever left, right, that equipment has to stay in Fort Erie. But if she left and a new doctor came in, he would have to purchase her used equipment. We would not give any funding to assist him if he was going to purchase that piece of equipment. So that piece of equipment is of no use to anybody now, unless a doctor is willing to purchase a used piece of equipment, which I would think a new doctor coming into town is going to say, well, no, if I'm going to spend that kind of money, I might as well buy a new one. So our incentive and our stipulation to Dr. Teal really, to me, is redundant. We didn't accomplish anything if we're saying that the equipment has to stay in town. I get it. I get where everybody's coming from, but I don't agree with it.
Councillor, or Ms. Ferriccioli, I would suggest that the wording of that third paragraph on the first page shouldn't refer to an appeal, it should refer to a review. The recruit wishes to have the decision reviewed, then they can provide you with additional information. So this will be coming back to us in the form of a bylaw? Yeah, okay. Are there any other questions with respect to this particular bylaw?
Yeah, can I
Or this
continue?
particular report?
So if we bring in a new physician, right, what incentive do we give them a maximum of coming into town?
Ms.
I
Ferriccioli?
see here physician recruitment up to $100,000 in total.
Well, that's for equipment.
Through you to Councillor Lubert's question, it would be $100,000 total for a new physician with the criteria. But this is a guideline, so depending, because there's so many different models, each agreement would come through individually. Each report would come through individually.
So the
So,
maximum
but
is
that 100,000, he can buy equipment with that, right? But it all has to be new.
No.
No.
Okay, so let's, Councilor Lubert, so you're flogging a dead horse and you're no further ahead than you were before. Everybody here on this side understands that you give the doctor the money, the doctor can do what he wants with the money, including purchasing old equipment. End of story. Okay, if the town is asked directly by a physician to facilitate the purchase of equipment, our position is the equipment has to be new. We're not gonna give money to for used equipment, but we'll give money to a doctor if the doctor wants to pay off his or her debt or buy equipment. Okay, anything further on this report? Thank you very much, Ms. Fitzgerald. Anything on any of the other reports contained in the consent agenda? Councillor Noy?
Thank you. Report number 2429, the 5G impact. I read that with interest. It's unfortunate that the councillor who brought it isn't here today. But I don't think we're moving ahead on this at this point, right? It's just basically for information purposes.
Correct.
Okay, because again, I've said this many times, I never like to be the canary in the mine. I like somebody else to try it for a while and see if there's any problems before I would agree, because there are some concerns. If you read the literature, I mean, there's pros and cons for everything. But I would like to see it, a little bit more information on the health status of it. So that's all I have on that report, but I have some other questions on others.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. On IS 28, 2019, the roadside ditching. Now, I've had a few calls because I've done a bit of ditching and very grateful for the ditching, don't get me wrong, but I had some residents concerned with the way the ditch is left after the ditching is done. And I've had some questions in regards to the amount of debris that is left that that the ditching causes, like the trees and the different vegetation that get cropped or cut. And they're worried that just leaving that there in the ditch may cause a problem with drainage. And this is not my scope of practice, so I don't really know how to answer that question, except that the purpose of ditching is to improve the drainage. And I'm just wondering if Tim can provide me with any more information on that.
Sure, Mr. Murata.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. You might be seeing some ditching where they come through and bush the ditches, in which case they just use a bush hog or lawnmower, larger size lawnmower to cut down the bush. Under this contract, we're actually having them come out with grading equipment. So the intention is to physically remove, as you suggested, any obstructions, anything that might be in the way, be it vegetation or silt, debris, things of that nature. It is the intention under this contract to basically load it on trucks and pull it away. So as you're suggesting, the ditches are free and clear to do what they do, which is to move the water.
If I can continue, thank you for that. So I'm going to pass this resident on to you because, again, some of the questions he's asking me, I don't know whether they used the bush hog or how they did it, but he's very concerned that it's going to cause a problem with flooding for him. So that's it for that question. Can I move on now? The other one was report number IS-30, 2019. It looks like we're going to award an engineering service for an environmental assessment for Winger Road Bridge. But reading the report, have we made that decision that we're going to move the bridge, or that there's a need to move the bridge?
Mr. Murata.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, part of the study will be to determine where is the best location for that bridge, so it's possible it stays in the same alignment that it's in. There are some issues with that alignment, so we want to look at what would happen, say, if we were to shift that bridge's location into the proper road allowance, and what would be the implications of that. But as part of this study, we'll explore those 4 different options we're looking at, and one of them is to keep it, one of them is to move it.
Okay, if I can continue, the current bridge that's there, I know it's narrow, and one of the design options was to just widen the bridge where it exists. Would that have required an environmental assessment?
Mr. Murata.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that would require an environmental assessment. A widening of the bridge would require us to have some impacts within that location, and again to look at something which is outside of a road allowance as well. It would require us to do environmental assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Any other councilors? Councilor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop, and I just want to go back to the 5G report. There was a whole lot of questions and concerns that were brought up by people in Ontario about the 5G technology and the pros and cons and everything. Reading through the report and looking at it, it's pretty evident that, yeah, there are some concerns, there's some pros and there's some cons, but the province is going to move forward with it regardless of anything. And on page 7 of the report, it's pretty clear. They're already investing $213 million in Eastern Ontario network, and 100, I think, was for Niagara region. Caledonia, total project cost will be $190 million. So 5G is coming, right? And we're going to have to put up with its adverse effects, if there are any. I don't know, that report says it's not conclusive of anything, but it's here and it's coming. So I think probably what we need to do is how can we adjust to it more than what the effects are. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councilors? Just have a few questions. Mr. Murata, with respect to the IS-25, which is the agreement with the government for public infrastructure, talks about a 10% holdback. Does the existing agreement speak of a holdback of any sort, or is that part of the amendment?
No, that holdback is actually already in place. Truthfully, we're kind of ready to wrap this up and finish with it. It's really a housekeeping measure the province is requesting for us to do, and in doing so, then that's going to enact the mechanism to get that 10% back, which is already in existence.
So in fact, they're actually holding about 15, 16, 17%.
Yep.
Okay. With respect to report IS 27, and this is the tender for stone shouldering, there is a deficit in the funding that was allocated. Where's that going to be coming from? Is that coming from the road reserve?
Yeah, we'll look at some of the other accounts and see. It's not a great amount, so we're hoping that we can find some savings from some other jobs and use those savings to cover that.
Okay. With respect to IS 29, and this is the one that deals with the water loss audit. In the first instance, it's a little disappointing that after all these years, we're still at about the same level in terms of the percentage of water that we're losing. I see that we have a good understanding of how we're losing it and why we're losing it, but we're not able to reduce that. But there's one factor in here that, actually there's two factors, one of which relates to the region saying that they will take a look at their meters, but they haven't done that yet. And we've been asking for that for a number of years. And I know that Mr. Walsh isn't here, and he's heard this before, but I'm wondering whether it would be appropriate for council to be passing a resolution to specifically request that the region look at its meters, that it calibrate its meters. Do you have any comment on that?
I do. I was in attendance with Mr. Walsh at a meeting recently with some of the staff in water wastewater at the region. I do believe they are willing to do that. It's just a matter, I think, of us encouraging them to do that a little bit more rapidly. So notwithstanding that it has taken some time, I do think they recognize the importance to Fort Erie that it is. We've provided some ideas as how to go about calibrating and looking at the numbers. We can continue to have those conversations.
Yeah, I don't think I want to keep conversing with them about whether they should be doing something that directly affects what we're paying in terms of a product that they're providing to us. So it may be that we should be moving a resolution with respect to this, or maybe amend this report to include a provision that that council requests the region to verify the accuracy of its meters at the Rose Hill water treatment plant. Mr. Cook, do you have any comment on this issue?
To your worship, I think either process would work. I know we finally are making some headway because the CAO at the region, the acting CAO, knows our issues, and he once worked for the town of Fort Erie, and he at one time was advocating for those to be calibrated as well. So I think either way is good, the resolution or making a change to this report and asking that the region calibrate those meters and maybe put a timeline to that as well.
All right. Is anyone interested in moving that an amendment to report IS 29, 2019, to add a provision that that council requests the calibration to verify the accuracy of the Rose Hill, the meters, water meters at the Rose Hill treatment plant? What's a reasonable period of time, Mr. Cookett?
I would say 1 year. I know you're not going to agree, but we're going to be into the winter months soon.
So I was thinking,
and it's not a project you want to tackle in the winter.
okay, so why don't we ask for before the end of 2019, and then they can come back and tell us why they can't do it then. Is that agreeable to you, Councillor Luberts? Okay, and Councillor Dubanow, we don't have to have a seconder, but, okay, is everybody clear on the amendment? Sure.
Is there not, when you have equipment that has to be calibrated, is there not a best practice associated with the equipment that say, okay, every 5, I know with the equipment I use, I have to calibrate it every year, and I have to prove if anybody knocks on my door that I've done it. So I'm just wondering, is there not a best practice related to the meters when they should be calibrated?
Mr. Murata or Mr. Cookett, whichever one.
Through you, your worship, to the counselor, there isn't in this case, and it's very difficult with these water meters because it's coming out of the water treatment plant. So it's not a typical water meter that you would have in your system where you could bypass it and still provide water to the rest of the system. This is coming out of the plant, so it's a little different situation, and it's much more difficult. But as Mr. Murata had said earlier, that he and Mr. Walsh have given suggestions how to do it.
Any other questions, Councillor Luberts, on the amendment?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. With the fact about to get them to calibrate, if you look at the report, right, the report, I read it in here and I'm just trying to find it. It says that the region, it does calibrate. What the problem is it's not being verified.
Right.
And that's what needs to be done.
Right.
Let's make sure that our wording is correct.
Right. It's to calibrate the meters to verify their accuracy.
No, verify their calibrations. That's what needs to be done if you read the report, and I can't find it right offhand. But I know I read it, and the region keeps saying, yeah, we'll do it, and they never do it.
Mr. Cookett?
So we can go ahead,
Yeah,
but
well,
let's make sure that staff gets the wording proper.
So let's get the right wording, Mr. Cookett. How would you word this?
I would agree with Mr. Luberts on this one. Verify the calibration. It is in the report. I can't find it offhand.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so is
All right,
everybody
thanks.
clear
Thanks.
on this? So we're going to be asking the region to verify the calibration and the accuracy of the water meters at Rose Hill Treatment Plant prior to the end of 2019. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the amendment? So that is carried. Mr. Murad, I had another question with respect to this report, and that has to do with when the water leaves the regional treatment plant. It's initially carried through a regional water main. And I know that there are a number of regional water mains in Fort Erie. Just like our lines may leak, do regional water mains ever leak?
The answer is yes, they do leak, depending on their age, the condition. We recently saw where one of their mains was leaking on Dominion Road, which required a substantial repair to it. They could leak at connections if there's connections on it, again, depending on their age. So truthfully, much like smaller size mains, transmission mains will also leak. That's correct.
So I understand the concept that if we have a water main that breaks and the water escapes, that's our responsibility, that's our cost. I have a little difficulty understanding why the municipality and the residents of Fort Erie should be responsible for paying for water that's lost through a regional water main. Is there an explanation?
Truthfully, I think it comes down to where the meters are placed in the system. Ideally, if you had a meter at every single connection, town connection to the region's trunk or transmission mains, and you would capture that at each and every connection. The fact that the meters are at the plant prior to leaving through a transmission main does leave us at risk to suffer, if you will, the consequences of those perhaps leaking mains.
What if we could get some information from staff with respect to how many meters that might involve and what the cost of that type of extravaganza might be, because I'm thinking that would be very expensive. So is it possible that we could get some information from you, just ballpark nature of what the number of meters might be and what the cost might be?
Yeah, we'd have to look at our system, find each one of those branches, and then
Yeah, Mr.
based on the
Passeri.
size of those pipes, yeah, that would kind of establish where you would have to put them, cost of meters and pits.
Here, here comes my conscience to save me. Mr. Cookett.
I just want to make a point here, and it's something that you have to think about, but we are a customer of theirs, we purchase water, so they base their rates on the volume of water they sell to us. So if their system is tight and our system is tight, they have an operating cost that they must recoup those. So as much as you may reduce the water cost, they will up their rates so that they can pay for their operating costs. It's a small point, but I just want to make that.
Yeah, no, and I understand that, but it seems to me that 41% is extremely high. And it may be that there is undoubtedly a portion that is escaping from regional water mains, and it may be that it's 10%. And you're right, that may, but we don't know that. We really don't know. And we're simply paying for water. There's no incentive, I guess my point is, there's really no incentive for the region to be efficient because they send out the water and we pay for it. And it gets lost, oh well. So I think it would be helpful if we had some information, and maybe it'll be at budget time. Maybe the appropriate time would be at budget time when Mr. Bezerick will be presenting the wastewater budget. So that would be fine. I did have some questions with respect to the Winger Road Bridge. And I guess part of my concern is we're going to be authorizing the engineers to do a study to advise us what the recommended course of action is, whether to keep a single lane bridge or make it a two-lane bridge where it's located, or make it a two-lane bridge in alignment with the road allowance, correct?
That is correct. The task is to review four different options. From that, they will come up with a preferred solution and provide some pre-design or early design that will help us establish a good estimate of cost.
Will the engineer know that nowadays people leaving Ridgeway to go north in the region will take Winger Road, will take Ridge Road, Farm Road, Winger Road to get to Netherby Road to get to the highway? I wonder if they'll know that, because that's happening now all the time, and it is a one-lane bridge. And discussions that I've had with the region would indicate that there is the possibility that sometime in the future, Winger Road might be an alternate route into Ridgeway from the highway, simply because it's so clogged now on Stevensville Road. So I hope that they will know that, because it seems to me that the preferred way to do this would be a two-lane bridge, whether it's in alignment with the existing road allowance, which I think would be preferable. I know it's a lot more expensive, but Mr. Cook, this would be the type of project I think that might qualify for some type of infrastructure funding if we could get the right program.
That's correct. So to your first point, we'll make them well aware that this could be a link in the Ridgeway, and we can provide traffic counts that prove that. We did make a submission for funding, and unfortunately we were unsuccessful. So we will watch for any other programs that are out there for stimulus money, infrastructure money, and make application, and hopefully receive some this time through. But again, we're off to AMO this week, and I think we're going to make the Minister of Infrastructure aware that we were unsuccessful.
Right, and we can also speak to the region's CAO about the lost water when we're there. Okay, I think those are the questions that I have. If there are no other, Councillor Luberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. On page 4 of the report, I guess it's the third paragraph is where
Is the
they
water
talk
report?
about the calibration.
Is the water report?
Yeah, calibration
Right,
and verification.
right.
And it states, just so that everybody knows, the region hasn't verified any of their calibrations since 2005. So that's how long we've been paying for water we don't use. But at the same time, Mayor Redekop, we should let everybody know that it's not just water main breaks that is our problem. a lot of it is infiltration into our sewer system. And, because the region charges us for water treated. And, we're not using as much water as we're getting paid to treat. And, that's where we're running into that's where the difference is.
That's right.
Yeah, so
We're
a lot of
billed
it's
for-
infiltration.
Well, it's not infiltration, it's lost water. Infiltration would be into the sewer system.
Yeah.
We're losing water, whether it's the regional mains or the local mains, whether it's fire services because of a fire, whether it's flushing, there's a whole bunch of, the report goes into quite
But-
in-depth detail.
Yeah, and at the same time, I don't know, I lost our staff on the question of why is it that we're still at the same number? I mean, we know what causes all of it. How come we're not getting on top of it and fixing it? I would think that at least it would come down somewhat.
We're doing a lot of things, and I don't know whether, Mr. Murata, you can respond to that. We're doing a number of things. Part of the problem is the system keeps getting bigger. Mr. Murata, can you comment?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, through you, we're about 4 years into this exercise, and as a newer exercise, we are finding new issues. One of the issues more recently we found is with large meters, so for ICI, so for larger water users, those types of meters, we're learning that they will get some drift to them in terms of how they calculate flow and usage. So we're learning that those devices need to be changed out or swapped out, updated sooner rather than later. So we have made some progress, but we've also found newer issues. We're going to continue to work at it. We're going to continue to do things like leak detection, examine meters, different types of meters, how they operate, and continue to try to sort of fine tune the system and continue to drop the losses.
Councilor Liberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop, but I just find that I just can't comprehend that you fix a problem and then you find a problem that's the exact same amount of water being no revenue from. You know what I mean? That's where I would think that if you found a major problem where the water is being we're not collecting the revenue from, then you might find a minor problem like a meter not registering properly. But a meter not registering properly, I don't know that it's going to not register properly the same amount as a leak would have. And, you know, our numbers aren't coming down. I know we're doing a lot of work and doing a lot of studies and doing a lot of work on trying to figure out where it all is, but somewhere along the line, we got to start putting some shovels in the ground and getting at these leaks or these infiltrations or whatever it is that we got.
Anything further?
Yeah, well, I would like the staff to comment on something like that. What is our plan to attack some of the problems that we have?
Mr. Cookett, I'm going to go to you on that.
As mentioned earlier by Mr. Murata, some of the things we're doing are leak detection to determine where these leaks are. The issue is we're putting a lot of money into our water mains, but at the same time, we have older water mains that are failing at an rate as well. So ones that weren't leaking before are starting to leak. So we need to invest more money in our infrastructure and get ahead of the game. It's not all about water loss either. We have theft. There's people who bypass their meters. We do use water for fire protection, and that is, we do regulate that. We know what those numbers are, so we subtract it from the overall. So we've got a good handle on that, but it's determining the leak detection. It's working with changing out the big water meters, because when those water meters fail, they fail to read less, not more. So those all combined, all those factors, I know it's coincidental. You're saying, you know, the numbers aren't changing, but I can't imagine what those numbers would be like if we're not making the investment we are. We need to increase that investment, and we need to do a better job at finding leaks that are out there.
Councilor Luberts? Okay, so who was it that moved the consent agenda? Somebody did, because you wanted to address a report. And would you like to move the consent agenda if you haven't already? Okay. Councilor McDermott has moved it. I'll call the question on the consent agenda with the one report amended. All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. We're going to take a 10-minute recess, and then we're going to come back, and when we do, we start with corporate services. Call this meeting back to order. We're now at Corporate and Community Services, so I'll hand the chair to Councillor Dubenow.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Corporate and Community Services now in session. We already had our delegation, so we're going to move right into reports. First report on the agenda, CS 07-2019, the 2018 Annual Financial Report. Do we have a mover for that? Councillor McDermott. Do we have any questions? Councillor Noyce.
Thank you, Councilor Dubenow. My question is in regards to the Gorman Ridgeway Road traffic study for $100,000. I'm just wondering if that's like a guesstimate, or is that what we're going to be spending on this? Is that what a traffic study will cost on this?
Mr. Jensen?
Yes, through you to Councillor Noyes. That's an item that did come forward, I believe it was in June to Council in terms of recommendation. The amounts for that, I would have to look to Infrastructure Services for in terms of providing more background for the actual amounts.
If I can continue, my understanding, and I do think there has to be a traffic study. I remember the meeting that we had, and that, but I'm just wondering. With all the development that's coming, if my memory serves me right, there was a recommendation that a traffic study wasn't necessary, so the developers aren't on the hook for this?
I'm not sure about that. Would perhaps Mr. Brady be able to comment on that?
Infrastructure Services has been head manning this through Kelly, so I'm not sure Tim's up to speed, so I'll try to give you as much as I can. And I believe the request for the study came as a request from council. Council asked for that study because they had noticed that there was a fair amount of traffic going on the road. We had had two traffic studies, a traffic study done for the two gas stations. And as a result of that, there was discussion that perhaps a study should be done further along, particularly with Compson's development coming in up the way, that there would be a need for a more comprehensive study. And that Kelly, Mr. Walsh would receive some direction from council, and I believe that was the genesis for that particular report.
Thank you. That's my recollection as well. I'm just wondering, Councillor Noyce?
And that's also my recollection. I'm just wondering, though, that why is some of this not, again, because of the development that's happening, can any of this $100,000 be put towards development charges for those for the Compson or the gas stations? I think the gas station did one, right?
Through you to the councillor, the gas stations have already paid for their studies, and those studies have been before us. This was viewed by council as a more comprehensive study. I mean, it's possible we could simply say, wait and ask for Mr. Compson to prepare this study, but I think the idea was to get ahead of the game and to have some understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. Is there any other questions? Your Worship.
Yeah, not so much a question as a comment. I want to commend staff for the way that they've been able to manage our budgets over the past several years, and they're to be commended because of the prudence that they've exhibited and the financial responsibility that they've been able to put into our budgetary process. So I think we should acknowledge that the staff has done a very good job with respect to managing the town's finances. The public should be aware of that.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And I completely agree. They did an excellent job. I think our tax increase this year, too, was very modest and below the level of inflation. So I do think they do a great job. And Mr. Jansen is definitely, and his staff are to be commended for that. And those comments are certainly warranted. Any other questions, comments? All right, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed, so that is carried. So moving on. Now we have CAO-22-2019, Council's 2018 to 2022 Corporate Strategic Plan. Do we have a mover for that, Your Worship? And do we have any questions or comments? All right, I'm seeing none. I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed? That's carried. So moving on, CAO-23-2019, the Economic Development and Tourism Corporation Governance Review Transition. Do we have a mover for that? Councillor McDermott, any comments or questions? Your Worship.
Just, I had sent a number of questions to the author of the report, Mr. Cookett, and I think I copied councilors. It was relative to my understanding of the Economic Development Corporation, and so I noticed that in the work plan, which is Appendix 1, the first item relates to the dissolution of the corporation, but I think it should be clear that the corporation doesn't need to dissolve simply because we've terminated the memorandum of agreement, and that's certainly up to them. So that was one point that I wanted to make out, and I don't know, Mr. Chair, whether that item should even remain in the work plan. I would think it should be removed, but maybe Mr. Cookett has some comment.
Yeah, Mr. Cookett?
Through your chair to the mayor, that's a very good point, and yes, they do not, they can continue as a separate corporation, and I think we should remove it from this work plan altogether.
Okay. Thank you. Other than that, I'm very much appreciative of the guidelines that we've got here and the report.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Luberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions on Appendix 1. The under the responsible parties is the EDTC, and then the issue to be resolved is under layoffs. And then the additional comments, and I'm a little confused as to what is the last comment that they make in the report. It says that these things will be included in their job offer. And I'm just wondering if someone can explain to me what's the job offer that we're talking about.
Yeah, sure, Councillor Luberts. Mr. Cookett?
Through your chair to the councillor. So in reviewing the termination of the EDTC, we felt it only appropriate that we hire the existing staff here at the town when they become a service department. The staff that are there currently are doing a fabulous job, and we're seeing great results, and there's great collaboration between the town and EDTC. So we will be putting together job offers to those existing employees, which will include things like OMERS and all their benefits, vacation, entitlements, and so forth.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Cookett, but I get that. And, you know, if there's a job available at the town of Fort Erie, I would think that it would only be appropriate that we have the proper competition process, just like any other job that comes available with the town. And I get, you know, that EDT staff has, you know, worked hard and, you know, been there, and they were loyal to the EDTC. And, but, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are looking for jobs in this town. And, you know, maybe there's some that are more qualified for the job. We don't know that unless we ask. And I don't know where council was informed of this decision, but is this something that would violate town policy? Like, are we saying that these people are single source people? Can't find no one else?
Mr. Cookett, can you answer that question?
You, Chair, to the councillor. Hiring and firing of the corporation or town staff is the responsibility of the CAO. It's not a decision of council, and I feel in this case it's my decision to be made, and I think we have qualified people now, and I don't think there's a need to go through that process.
Yes, I agree.
Councillor Luberts?
Mr. Chair, I understand hiring and firing is a responsibility of the CAO, right? But the CAO still has to follow policy, right? If there's a job offer for the town of Fort Erie, it's the CAO's job to find an employee. And then he puts that job out to wherever, go bid to bid on or unemployment or wherever he goes, and he advertises that job. But now, well, you're telling me that we're not going to do that. We're just going to give it to somebody, and we're not going to allow anybody to participate in the competition. And I can't say that I agree with that. I'm not, don't get me wrong, Mr. Chair, I'm not criticizing any member or any staff of the EDTC, but I'm not going to agree, right, to bypass every other resident of town of Fort Erie or within the region or anybody that's qualified for the job that not be able to get a job at the town of Fort Erie. I can't agree with that.
No, I appreciate that point, Councillor Luberts. Perhaps Mr. Cookett can just clarify if the point you made about policy I'll just let Mr. Cookett speak to that if there's any policies that would affect this.
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Luberts, there isn't a policy. Once again, it is left to me. We're assuming that these individuals are going to accept these job offers. They, for whatever, may not because of what we're offering, be it wage or salaries and so forth. In that particular case, we'll go out to the public. I did hear from public when we were actually going through the process of determining if we're going to terminate the agreement or not, statements made by councillors that we needed to give the current staff an opportunity to work within town hall. And I agree with that.
Thank you, Mr. Cookett. Do you have anything else, Councillor Luberts?
Thank you very much, Mr. Cookett. You heard from a few councillors, but it wasn't a vote of council. But that's just my comment. And I don't know that we should be just going on what a few councillors want instead of what the majority wants.
Anything else, Councillor Luberts?
Again, Mr. Chair, on staff benefits.
Well, Councillor Luberts, let's just see if there's anyone else who has any questions or anything else they want to raise, and then I'll come back to you.
Chair, I think I have the floor. I get to ask questions.
Well, you asked a question.
You asked a million questions earlier, and you kept saying,
Councillor Luberts, I'm just offering opportunity for other people to ask questions.
And now you want to cut me off.
That's all.
After I ask one question.
One at a time, one at a time. If you still have questions, Councillor Luberts, then I agree you should be.
Yes, I have the floor. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Under the same part of the Appendix 1, staff benefits, it says the staff will be enrolled in all of the town's employment offerings, EDTC board, and EDTC solicitor to work out the termination of those agreements with benefit providers. But can staff explain, is the town involved in this at all, or is this just through the EDTC?
Mr. Cookett.
Through you, Chair to the Councillor, I'm not sure if I totally understand your question. And what section are you referring to in
Yeah, staff benefits under economic development. So Appendix 1, responsible party, timeline, or issues to be resolved, staff benefits. That's all taken care of by the EDTC, correct?
So through you, Chair, to the Councillor, so what that is saying is these new employees will be enrolled in all town benefits, so be it the OMERS, our dental plan, our medical, our WSIB, All those benefits that our staff get will be offered to these new staff.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Mr. Cookett. But isn't that something that's normal in any time you hire a new employee? That's nothing new, right?
You're absolutely correct. That's nothing new.
Yeah, all right. But the termination part, that's all done through the EDTC, right? Town has nothing to do.
That is correct. And our legal solicitor makes comment in the reports regarding that. I would think that the EDTC will lay off those current employees, but that's something that we have nothing to do with. If it's a layoff termination, however they handle it, it's got nothing to do with us.
Okay. And if I may, Mr. Chair, the under the closing of the bank accounts and so forth, the last statement was that the town can take over some of the liabilities that the EDTC may have. And what are these liabilities that staff's talking about?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor. So there will be some liabilities that extend beyond December 31st, 2019, and those relate to things like the BIA have audits, and they must provide us with background information to receive funding and so forth. That is usually supplied to them in January. So there's those types of payments that need to be made. There's things like audit expenses, things of that sort to wind down and need to be actually provided to those who had made submissions. So it's nothing new. It's part of their current budget, but it will extend beyond the December 31st, 2019.
And thank you very much. And then moving down to the work plan, the town of Fort Erie's responsibilities. And in the second column, the hiring of staff. In the second column, said additional hire. We might be hiring additional hiring. And I'm thinking that if we're going to, and that this is all about the transition, I would assume. And if we're going to hire additional, would we not just hire them on contract in the beginning until we go through the transition and let things settle down? Because I'm sure in the beginning, everybody's going to be overwhelmed with the workload when we first bring them in-house. So if there's any additional hiring, I would like to see that it's on contract first, and then we'll just see if we need somebody full-time, because we might be able to distribute that around. Could I get a comment from the CAO on that?
Yeah, Mr. Cookett.
Yeah, through you, Chair. That actually should say there's always been 3 full-time employees over there at the EDTC. One employee left, and they filled that position temporarily with a contract position, which expires the end of December. We will be bringing over the 2 full-time employees, and if there's a need for that third person, then we'll go through the hiring process of doing so. What you're suggesting is that third position be a contract position. That's something that we can look at the time. It's just very hard to get good quality people under a contract position. So it's something we can look at the time. Our goal, first of all, is get the 2 full-time employed with the town.
Councillor Luberts.
All right, thank you very much. Now, the moving down on the chart, I think it would be the last one. It talks to about adherence to town policies, and One of them is vacation entitlement, sick time entitlement, overtime, etc. And I can only go back to what we agreed to with the EDTC in the past. And I can't remember the year, but it was shortly after they broke away and became an independent corporation. We seconded a few of employees from the town to the EDTC. In that agreement, we were obligated financially for their severance for the portion of time that they were with the town of Fort Erie. And then, years after that, the EDTC took over full responsibility of their employees, and the town was severed from any responsibility to those employees. And now I'm reading that we're going to be talking about vacation entitlements, sick time entitlements. We have no obligation for them. These are new employees. If you're bringing them in, they're going to start as a new employee. Now, we're going to say, oh, while you were working for a separate corporation in Fort Erie, let's say even if you were working at Fleet, you're going to come and work at the town of Fort Erie, and we're going to continue on with your vacation benefits. I don't know that we should be doing that. I don't know that that is a policy of the town of Fort Erie. And yeah. I'd like staff to explain why would we do something like that?
Yeah, I imagine we offer vacation benefits to all employees, but I'm just wondering if Mr. Cookett can expand on that even further.
Sure, through you, Chair to Councilor Lewitz. So we have a bunch of administrative policies regarding sick time and so forth. For example, a new employee is allowed so many sick days per year. That's what they'll be allocated as a new employee. When it comes to vacation time, we're fairly flexible on that when it comes to non-union employees. And typically we provide them with 3 weeks starting, but we take into consideration a year's service. So for example, if they have worked somewhere and they've got 10 years experience, we take that into consideration so that when they hit the 15-year mark, we would probably move them to 4 weeks, and that's negotiated at the time of hiring. So these employees, as far as what they will be offered, is not going to be any different than what we would offer a new employee.
So if we had an employee that worked for 20 years at Fleet and filed for a job at the town of Fort Erie, then we would honor their 6 weeks vacation. And we would offer them this. I mean, to me, this seems like we're only doing this for the people from some separate corporation. We wouldn't normally do this for any other new employee that came into the town.
I think so.
Mayor Radikoff, can you share that with me too?
I asked
Councilor
if I missed his
Lewitz.
answer, because he responded to just the scenario that you opposed, and that's not what he said.
So the hirees are going to be non-union.
Through you, Chair, to the Councilor, that is correct. These are non-union positions, and they will be treated as such when we do their hiring contract. What I was referring to earlier is typically now, for us to recruit new people, the standard of 2 weeks vacation no longer works. We cannot get qualified staff to come here and start with 10, 15 years of experience and start with 2 weeks vacation. So typically now we've increased that to 3 weeks, but we recognize their years of service. So in our policy, if you hit 15 years of service, you'll get moved to 4 weeks vacation. We'll take in consideration their 10 years or wherever their previous employee was. So when they work with us for another 5 years, they're eligible to be moved up a week's vacation. So we're not giving them their equivalent vacation that they had at their previous employee, but we do take their years of experience into consideration.
Okay, thank you. And if I may,
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, on
yeah.
page,
Quick question, Councillor Luberts, just quick question. Is this a follow-up to the question, or are you asking a new one? The only reason I ask is, I think you've asked 5 or 6 questions, and I'm just wondering, I'd be happy to come back to you, but I'm just wondering if there's anyone else who would perhaps like the opportunity to ask Mr. Cookett some questions about this report.
I just have one more, and it's just
Okay.
a comment to make.
Yep, that's fine.
On page 5 of the report, on the last paragraph, we got some comments from our legal department, and I'm just hoping, and maybe Mr. Cookett can comment on this, but the town is not entertaining that we continue to lease the EDTC facility and house the EDTC in that building.
Mr. Cookett?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor. You are correct. Their lease runs out of June or July of next year. The only thing we may consider is leaving them in that space if our space here is not ready. But I don't see that being an issue. We're looking at placing them in the finance department where there's a separate entrance, separate counter, and so forth, and we feel we can have those renovations done prior to. So I agree with you that we will not continue with them in that space over at Garrison.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to ask questions. Thank you. That's all I have.
No, you're very welcome. That's why we're here. Does anyone else have any questions or comments about the report? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor Dubineau. Just a little follow-up, I think, to some of Councillor Lubert's questions in regards to new hires. I think they would be treated like any new staff, that there would be a probationary period.
Mr. Cookett?
That is correct.
And in regards to the number, and again, it says that we were going to look at in 6 months to see if it's needed. It's not automatic that there's going to be 3 staff. And I will bring up a suggestion is that if you do a comparison in other municipalities our size of economic development, they don't have 3 full-time staff. And our cost per person currently is $23 per person, where in most municipalities, our size and even larger, it's $7 per person. So I'm hoping, I see some of the cost savings already in this report. So that's good. One of the things I'm looking at this file, it says responsible parties, and I'm not going to go over all the list, but it says responsible party being the Economic Development and Tourism Corporation. There's a number of jobs or issues that need to be resolved. Do you know if they've moved on any of them?
Mr. Cookett?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor. In working with the general manager of the EDTC, this was our first kick at some of the things that needed to be dealt with prior to December 31st. I'm not aware of any of these being dealt with. That would be a good question to ask our council members that sit on the board of the EDTC. What is the status of that?
Thank you for that. And I'm sure you'll work very closely with the EDTC, and I have great confidence that these things will happen. But I'm just wondering if we could, on let's say maybe every 2 months, I guess it's not that many months till December, have an update, maybe an update on as things progress so that we have an idea of what's going on.
Mr. Cookett?
Through you, Chair, I'd be more than happy to provide you with updates.
Excellent.
And the one thing in there is that in their budget is a website for $17,500, and I'm wondering if that could be held in abeyance until they're in-house.
Mr. Cookett?
Through you, Chair, that's exactly what we've been thinking. We too are going to revitalize our website, and we will incorporate the EDTC into our website. So that's what we're thinking as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. Did you, any other questions or comments? Anyone else? Your Worship.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just want to point out that as the report indicates, on June the 17th, we directed certain things to take place, one of which was to have the CAO provide a report with respect to the steps necessary to bring the economic development and tourism service in-house. This report includes a work plan. I agree with the work plan. I support the work plan. I'll support the report, and I want to thank the CAO for his work on this to date.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor McDermott, did you have any questions or comments?
No, I just wanted to echo exactly what the mayor said. I'm pretty clear on that. I'm very happy with the report that we have going forward.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott, and I would like to echo the same sentiment that I appreciate all the work that the CAO has put into this, as well as the staff we currently have at the EDTC. I personally might have done things a little differently, but now that we're going this route, we have to make it the best possible option for the town of Fort Erie. I'm fully supportive of it, and I certainly look forward to this process progressing. So if that's the case, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. So we're done with reports. So do we have any new business inquiries? Seeing none, do we have any questions or comments about the business status report? All right. Seeing none, and we've already gone through presentations and delegations, so I will hand the chair back to His Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dubenel. So that takes us into Planning and Development Services, and that would be you, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Planning and Development Services is now in session. That brings us to report number PDS 45-1 2019, supplementary report, shipping cargo containers and commercially zoned zoning bylaw amendment and changes to the site plan control bylaw. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor McDermott. The report is now on the floor for comments and questions. Councillor McDermott. Dubenel.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. I'm just wondering, I'm wondering if there's a way that we could perhaps find a compromise between the existing they're all non-conforming uses because technically the bylaw does not allow this on any commercial properties and limited uses on industrial. And I'm concerned about the existing non-conformant uses overburdening them. I'm wondering if it's possible to have staff refer this perhaps to the regional municipality of Niagara for some discussion about development charges and how they would apply to any storage containers if we were to have minor variances and building permits applied. And I'm wondering if we could perhaps staff look into that.
Mr. Brady, would you like to comment?
Certainly. Through you to the councillor. If council would direct us, we would certainly have discussions with the region. As it sits, all of the containers are illegal, and they were built without building permits. And to bring them into conformity and make them legal, they would need to have building permits. And also at that time, it's my understanding that the region views them to be DC eligible as commercial structures. So if that's the case, there would be a significant cost per square meter foot as per your discussions. And I think that's a question that hasn't really been kicked around a lot, is one way of putting it. And it may make some sense to have some discussion on that and let council know what the conclusion of that discussion is before we move forward.
Mr. Dubenel?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Noyes. And perhaps I might need some assistance here procedurally because I know normally we could postpone something like this, but I'm wondering, would it be a referral to staff to deal with this at the regional level? I'm not sure how we would do this to get that information and then bring it back. Would it be a postpone? I'm not entirely sure.
Mayor Redekop, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, from what you're saying, it sounds like we need to refer this back to staff to have dialogue with not only the region, but probably other municipalities, because if the region is looking for development charges on these, this is going to impact every municipality. So I think it should be referred back to staff for them to do that investigation if that's what you're driving at. Perhaps with a time frame, and Mr. Brady might be able to give us some guidance on that.
I would certainly be happy to provide some guidance on that. We're in the summer. Sometimes in the summer it takes a little longer to get things done than I might like it to take. So if you would allow us to bring that back in October, that would be helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Dubenel?
I'd be fine with that. I'd actually like to move that we refer this back to staff then to have some dialogue with the region.
I don't think that you can, but I think.
okay.
I knew, because you've already spoken to it, but I think I can.
Okay.
I think I would, yeah.
Mayor Redekop?
Yeah. So I would move that we refer this report back to staff for further information relative to the implications of DC charges and discussions with the region and any other local municipalities that they might think appropriate to be returned to council for the committee, first committee report in October.
Does somebody, do I have a mover for that?
Yeah, I'm moving that.
You're moving it? Okay, any comments or questions on the deferral? Seeing none, all those,
On that, we really can't speak to it any further.
It's being referred. If there are some items that need to be also addressed by staff, then you can raise those through the chair. Because if it's being referred for the staff to do further work, and there's some additional stuff that can be done in conjunction with that, that could be part of it. No. This is being referred for a purpose. And the purpose is for staff to provide us with more information. So it may very well be that this information should also be looked into by staff. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll call point of order and I'll ask for verification from our clerk because our rules of procedure say deferral is only on timing. Any debate is about timing only.
It's not debate. It's a
Madam Clerk, can I get some verification on the rules of procedure?
Miss Watson, can you answer that, the point of order?
Yes, I believe, Councillor Luberts, that a deferral speaks to timing only.
Yeah, but point of order, this isn't a deferral, this is a referral. Okay, thank you.
So if I'm correct then, Ms. Watson, we are free to further discuss this? No.
You're entitled to get, if there's further things that councilors would like to be looked into by staff during the period of referral.
That's what I meant. So, okay, so are we clear on that, Councillor Luberts, that since we're referring this back to staff, not deferring it, but referring it back to staff, council members who have comments they would like staff to consider can comment now.
Where does that state that in the rules of procedure?
Ms. Watson?
Luberts?
We're referring it to staff, and then we're going to defer this till October. We're not going to discuss any more of this year report
Councilor
tonight.
Luberts, I think the timing wasn't so much to timing, it was more the saying the staff thought when they could have the report back to council, the time that they required to do the investigation that's being
bring
requested.
forward, Madam Chair, Mayor Redekop brought forward that we would refer this to staff until October.
No.
You're making a referral to staff, or you're deferring. You don't make a referral until October.
Okay, so
Okay,
let's just do this a different way. I've brought the motion to refer. I'd like to expand what it is I'm asking staff to do. So instead of just looking into the DC matter and having dialogue with the region and other local municipalities, there are a couple of other things that I need to add. Is that what you're saying, Councilor McDermott, and what would they be?
One would be that after talking to Ms. Dulles today, there's a possibility that there will be a building permit necessary to do that. It could be charged DC charges from the town of Fort Erie as well.
That's, I think, what Mr. Brady is going to be looking into.
That's what I want to make sure.
That's what
we
this
get,
is about, yes.
Because it's only fair to people that are out in the audience.
Yeah, no, that's what the referral is for, to get additional information from our staff.
Okay. Councilor Luberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just on all of that, I think that when we got the report from staff originally, right, what we asked staff to do was to take a look at other municipalities and what other municipalities were doing within the region and elsewhere in Ontario. Now, I'm sure that there were some other municipalities in this town, in this region.
Okay, point of order, Madam Chair.
That's not to do.
This is the issue about development charges. That hasn't been discussed with other municipalities or the region. That's really what the referral is for. You're quite correct. There were other municipalities' experiences that were referred to in the report. This is to deal with the implications of the development charges, how they might impact the building, permit requirements, et cetera. So that's why I suggested that we also speak to other area municipalities, because they may not be aware of the development charge aspect.
Okay, I'm going to say that the referral is now, motion is now on the floor. All those in favor of the referral? All those against? The referral carries. That brings us to report number PDS 45, 2019. Recommendation report on
Yeah,
we're going to,
Madam Chair, I'll move that, and I'll move that it also be referred to the same, on the same basis.
Okay. So we now have a referral for PDS 45, 2019. All those in favor of the referral? All those against? Carries. That brings us to report number 47-2019, proposed draft plan subdivision amendment to the Town of Fort Erie zoning bylaw number 12990, 1788773, Ontario. Incorporated Frank, Rena, and Marcelo Petra. Owners, Quadric Group, Susan Smythe, agent, South Ridge Meadows, south of Dominion Road, west of Wales Avenue. Okay, the report have been moved by Councillor Dubineau. The report's now on the floor for comments and questions. Mayor Redekop?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with some comments, and then I've got a number of questions. And the comments that I'm starting with really are directed to the fact that a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago, we asked staff to rationalize our zoning, our residential zoning categories to better accommodate the developers who were coming in here and asking for various changes. It was almost as if every time a plan of subdivision came forward, there were all kinds of requests to vary the setbacks, vary the lot coverage, et cetera. So we thought we had dealt with that. And lo and behold, 3 years later, every subdivision proposal that we get, there's more requests for variations of the minimum lot coverage, the setbacks, the front yard, or the front porches, side yards, et cetera. And so I'm beginning to wonder whether we even need a zoning bylaw, because it's getting to be like the Wild West here. And I'm very supportive of staff. I want to make that patently clear, that I think we have an excellent planning staff. And there have been many reports that we've received. There's been much work that has been done by our planning staff that deserves and has been recognized for the merit of the quality of the work. This goes to the philosophy of planning, and this goes to the philosophy of what it is that this municipality will tolerate in terms of changes. I just can't fathom why it is that we continue to have multiple requests for changes to our setbacks, to our lot coverage, what have you. Quite aside from eroding the integrity of the planning documents that we follow, I don't think it's helping us with respect to one other of our issues, which is affordable housing. How the heck do we promote affordable housing when we're allowing smaller lots and bigger houses, and they're certainly not in the price range that we think we need? The housing mix is good. I like the idea of this housing mix. I very much support this plan in terms of the housing mix and in terms of the architectural design criteria that they've offered. I think that's excellent, and I support the development in that area. I have a real problem, though, with respect to why we would keep reducing or keep changing our setbacks and changing the actual zonings. We don't have the appropriate zoning categories, then staff should be telling us we need new zoning categories. Because otherwise, all we're doing is continuously changing what we have. And that has an impact, because the first developer that is able to change then becomes a model for the second developer, for the third developer, for the fourth developer, and pretty soon we don't have much of a zoning bylaw to rely upon. So my questions then go to, first and foremost, we have an active transportation master plan that we're waiting for. We have a need, I think, and a perceived requirement for sidewalks to make sure that people can get around our community. This report is fairly contradictory in terms of sidewalks on Dominion Road. Sidewalks on Dominion Road, yes, as long as they don't interfere with drainage on Dominion Road, according to the region. The region says it supports the sidewalks. Their comments don't really say that. I drive by this parcel of property every day, sometimes 2 and 3 times a day. I don't know where the sidewalks will go as long as there's open ditches. I don't understand why from Prospect Point Road, east on Dominion Road, on the south side, we have a curb. You go a little further east to this parcel of property, and there is no curb, there's ditches, and that's the way the reconstruction of Dominion Road was planned. I can understand that if there's no development on the horizon, nobody that could help share the cost of that, but it seems to me that's something that was a missed opportunity. I don't see how we're going to get sidewalks on Dominion Road unless there's at least an urban standard on that road. So I don't support the part of the report that says it should be a rural cross-section. I don't agree with that. There is the issue of drainage that the residents have raised, and I have a question about whether any of the residents whose property is back on the Friendship Trail in the vicinity of this development would be affected by the drainage changes that are being proposed. Can answer that.
Mr. Brady?
There are a series of questions in there, which I'll try to start from the beginning. The one dealing with why we provide some flexibility in the zoning is because we want to be development friendly. We've been instructed through a number of strategic plans that we should try to encourage development. And if we can accommodate that and still provide for good planning, we do that. And that's why we're doing that, is we're trying to be what we've been asked to be, which is to provide good customer service and to provide for positive work with the developers. I agree with the mayor in his comments about the cross-section, the rural cross-section on Dominion. That's not an issue for the local municipality. That's an issue that was raised by the regional municipality, and I agree with the mayor that they are extremely inconsistent in that their comments is that they would not support it to be an urban cross-section at this time. If you read the report, the region is suggesting that if in the future this plan doesn't get built until sometime in the future, then they might want it to be an urban cross-section at the present time. If council as a whole believes that this should be an urban cross-section, I would be pleased to have direction in that respect to provide that to the region and to explain to them that town council has viewed their staff, lower staff commentary that it needs to be a rural cross-section at this time, but that they would like it to be considered urban cross-section in the future. And we could go to the region and say, council is directing it to be an urban cross-section now. That would cost the developer some money, but I don't believe that's the issue here. The issue is the region doesn't want their new road to have cuts in it. there's ways around that. And so in that respect, the drainage issue that was also raised, I don't believe that there will be a problem with that. I believe it has been addressed in the report, both through the stormwater management and also through the conditions that are provided. One thing I would add is that we've also tried something a little creative in this particular report, because one of the things that was asked for at some of the meetings and in terms of the discussions that's been held is that there wanted to be connectivity to the Friendship Trail. And so what we're doing is we're redirecting some of the developers' money to make sure that that connectivity occurs now as opposed to sometime in the future. So when the development occurs, there will be connectivity, pedestrian connectivity to the Friendship Trail. We have not had a subdivision that I'm aware of in this town that's had urban design guidelines. Urban design guidelines is something which is used quite commonly in larger municipalities, and it provides the municipality with an opportunity to make the character of the neighborhood more palatable. In this particular case, we've been given the opportunity by the developer that urban design guidelines would be put together, which we would review and approve, and once they're in place, that the developer would have to pay to ensure that as every building permit is issued, any building permit that's issued on this particular subdivision, that they would, the design of the home would go to an urban designer to review to ensure that it's meeting the urban design guidelines. So it provides us with an opportunity for a refined approach to urban design and, interestingly enough, not cost the municipality anything. So this subdivision, yes, there are some changes that have been asked to it, and as always is the case when we deal with developers, we try to do with what I refer to, and I've often told my staff that, and I think they do an excellent job at that, and that is to try to deal with the Latin comment of quid pro quo. We give, they give, and that results in what is before you. The only thing I am disappointed in this, and it's not through my staff's efforts, don't get me wrong, but I agree wholeheartedly with the mayor, this notion of a rural cross-section on Dominion doesn't make any sense.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Mayor Redekop, did you?
Yeah, so thank you very much for all of that, and I'm quite interested in the request by Mr. Brady that council provide direction to him with respect to this issue of the cross section of Dominion Road. So how would we direct that, and how strident should we be? Should that be a condition of draft approval?
Mr. Brady?
Through to the mayor. One of the things that you have to always recognize when you put in draft plan conditions is that you should never put in a draft plan condition that the person that you're asking to do the condition doesn't have responsibility for. So you can't ask them to paint the sky green because they can't paint the sky green. And in this particular case, it's not up to the developer whether or not they should allow Dominion Road. I would suggest that what you do is that you put a resolution through, in my opinion, approving this draft plan of subdivision, and ask for the zoning bylaw to be held until the resolution of the issue along Dominion Road. Therefore, that would give assurance to the developers how to move forward, and it would give a very strong direction to staff. And I think you may want to ask both the director of planning and perhaps even the CAO to have a discussion at the regional level, because I don't believe this is going to get resolved at a lower level.
Mayor Redekop?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I got all of the wording, but it looks to me like the fourth that in the recommendation should be that council authorizes staff to prepare the necessary bylaw, not to be presented until the issue of the Dominion Road cross-section has been resolved. So I would.
That would be great.
I would move that amendment.
The amendment's now on the floor for any comments or questions. Councilor Dubino?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the comments about the rural versus urban cross-section. I get that, and my preference would definitely be for an urban cross-section as well, just from a planning perspective and a road network perspective. But I'm just wondering, Madam Chair, if perhaps Mr. Brady, I assume it would be him, can perhaps comment on the situation that was discussed earlier a little further to the west. On the south side, which I believe was Dominion Woods, which is a fairly new subdivision, we have an urban cross-section with a sidewalk where all those new houses went. But on the north side, we have a rural cross-section, also with a sidewalk and ditches. And I believe those houses were built, I want to say, in the 1990s. So I'm just wondering if perhaps through you, if staff could perhaps comment, is that something the region is looking to do similar with this, or are there different constraints related to the road allowance there, preventing a sidewalk and a ditch? I'm just wondering if we could get some clarification on that.
Mr. Brady?
There's two issues, if you will, through you to the councilors. Two issues here. One is the notion of the urban cross-section, and the second is the related but secondary issue of a sidewalk. The area that you're talking about does have a sidewalk and is a rural cross-section, and in 1990 it may well have been appropriate. However, we're in 2019 now, and if we look at this particular area of Dominion Road, the last subdivision that was built going into town is an urban cross-section, and it's on the same side of the road. So now, if you're ever going to get an urban cross-section, my suggestion to you, it would be now. If it may be possible, and if we exhaust all of our efforts at the region, and that's the way it is, but we end up with a rural cross-section and a sidewalk, it's kind of like getting a half-full basket, if you will. So I'm not going to say that ain't coming back. But the point being is, if we're going to go for an urban cross-section, now's the time to do it, because it would be very unreasonable to think that at some point in time in the future, for the next 50 years in the future, that the municipality is then going to go out there and bear the costs of actually putting in an urban cross-section. So bearing that in mind, the resolution that you put forward I think is helpful. I'll lean on my friend Tom to help me at the region, and we'll see what we can do, and we'll definitely report back.
Councilor Dubino, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, and I appreciate the explanation. That was excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Brady.
Is on the amendment? Report carries.
The amendment.
Of the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? Okay, the amendment report is now on the floor. Any comments or questions?
Yeah, I still have the floor.
Mayor Redekop?
So in terms of the ditching, the excavating then on, or to the Friendship Trail, that's all being paid for by the developer, I presume?
Mr. Brady?
Yes, I believe so. I'm not getting a nod to the negative, so yes.
Okay. I notice in Appendix 5 of the report, which deals with existing sidewalks and proposed sidewalks, shows in green, this is on page 31 of the report, shows where all the new sidewalks will go. For some reason, there's no sidewalks west on Dominion Road from Gordon Avenue, but that is a parcel of land that is being developed as part of this subdivision. Is there any reason why the sidewalk isn't there?
Mr. Brady?
Page 31.
Mr. Kernahan?
Okay. Yep, okay, perfect.
Thank you.
And the other final question that I had really relates to the draft conditions, and in particular, the one that number 24 that deals with Bell Canada seems to be, that's on page 99, I guess. Or actually on 100 and on 101. Is it only Bell Canada that has the benefit of these types of arrangements for easements? I would have thought that all of the recognized utilities would have rights to easements.
Mr. Brady?
In
All
this-
the telecommunications.
Unless I'm corrected by my much brighter junior people who are in the room, my understanding is this is written in this fashion because this is a condition that Bell Canada has asked for, and they are going to be responsible for clearing.
Mr. Kernahan?
The town requests a standard condition, which is condition 6 on page 99, which provides that the owner must deed any and all easements that may be required for utilities in general. So the condition 24 was requested specifically by Bell Canada. That's why it was transcribed in that way. But in order to capture other telecommunications utilities, we add condition number 6 as a standard condition.
And if I might, just while you're up there, Mr. Kernahan, I might, Madam Chair, number 14, which talks about sidewalks on internal streets. Shouldn't think Dominion Road is an internal street with respect to this, but I presume that's how it's being defined.
Through you, Madam Chair, again, a standard condition, which the wording might not be perfect on. Typically, subdivisions have internal streets. This subdivision sort of turned inside out, and all streets are actually external. But the intent of that condition is that any street which touches a portion of developed lands include a sidewalk.
Should it be clear on that?
We could clarify that if it's your will.
I think it should say all streets within the subdivision. I think. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kernahan. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Lubert?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just a comment on the whole draft plan and the whole subdivision, and just to follow up on some of the things that the mayor was brought up earlier. You know, we bring these draft plans of subdivision into the town, and we go over them, we debate them. They get all kinds of recommendations and all kinds of requests that they have to follow through on. And then we give them approval. And then a year from now, the developer comes back and says, oh, well, you know, we decided that we're gonna change the side yard setbacks, and we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. That's gonna give us 4 or 5 extra houses, and then everything's gonna get more condensed. And that meets your density targets in the town and everything. And we're gonna change the whole subdivision. When is it going to come to the point where we tell these guys, is this what you really want? Because we're not changing nothing anymore. Because it costs money for staff resources, it wastes time here at council, because we go through this draft plan of subdivision 2-3 times. Like, is this the final draft that they're presenting? Or is this just the one that they want to get approved? And then they're gonna make changes later?
Councillor Lupert, I understand where you're going with this, and I will say is that this draft plan of subdivision may not happen for years. We don't know that the actual subdivision and things may change, and even the person who's building it may change. But anyway, I'll let Councillor Brady answer that.
I think you were doing a great job, to tell you the truth. The ones that tend to come back to council for changes, and sometimes you're quite right, Councillor Lubert, sometimes there's significant changes, are ones that have been around for a while, ones that have been around. And in the history of the town of Fort Erie, there was a time when there was an awful lot of draft plans of subdivisions put on the book, but they weren't really moving their way through to being registered. Those days are somewhat behind us now, as we have sort of moved into this new genre that we're in, and that we have many registered plans of subdivision and a number more coming through the books. And this my hope, and my hope is always the case when we have a draft plan of subdivision approved by this council, that this draft plan of subdivision will be built in the fashion that it is. If it sits and wanes for, wait, I didn't mean it in any other fashion than, if it takes a while to move forward, then it may be back in front of us. However, in this particular case, I am not too sure that there's much that we could do in terms of making any more density on this subdivision than there is at the present time. So I'm not sure that that answers your question, Councilor Luberts, completely, but we are cognizant of that, and we'll try to do our best.
Councillor Luberts?
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Brady. And I'm not saying that, I was looking for an answer to the question. I just wanted to make the comment because sooner or later, we have to start looking at, these draft plans and these red line revisions, and we have bylaws in place, we have setbacks in place, and then as soon as we change all the setbacks, that becomes the new norm. That's the new bylaw. And I'm just getting sick of it.
Thank you, Councillor Luberts. Mayor Redekop?
Yeah, Chair, I just want to make it clear that I'm not trying to criticize the developer. I think the developer's got some very interesting ideas and has been very cooperative with respect to some of the things that we've asked them to do here. I'm just in general terms concerned about the drift with respect to our zoning bylaws. So any comments that I made, I hope they didn't offend the developer. It wasn't my intention, but I do feel strongly about Dominion Road.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, the report's now on the floor. All those in favor? The report carries. That brings us to report number PDS 48, 2019, proposed zoning bylaw amendment, 4130 Erie Road, Kim Alvarez, owner, and Greg Terrace, agent. The report's now on the floor. Thank you, Councillor McDermott. Councillor Luberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Tomorrow, I have a BIA meeting, and I just want to bring it to this council's attention that in the past, we have stipulated that if we have any public meetings, then we will not vote on those public meetings at the same meeting, because it gives the impression that we're just jamming this down the taxpayers' throats, no matter what it is. I'm not opposed to allowing a patio to be on this property, but I'm not in favor of not asking the BIA for some comments. So I would ask council to defer this report until our next council and committee meeting.
Well, Councillor Luberts, I think because now that you've spoken on the issue, you can't. So I'm wondering if someone else would want to defer this.
I haven't spoken on the report.
I think you just did. Okay, Mayor Redekop?
Chair, I'm sympathetic to that, but if it's going to be deferred so that the BIA can be informed of this, I think there's a couple of other bits of information that we should get. I think there should be some consultation with the Public Health Department about the idea of 128 people possibly using 4 toilets. And I would like to be circulated to council how the 90 people will be accommodated on that patio. In other words, what's the outline for the for accommodating that number of people? There may be some other bits of information that other members of council might want if this is going to be deferred, which I'm prepared to move to the September committee meeting.
Point of order, Mayor Redekop, you can't refer it now either.
I can. I indicated that. No, I indicated
you
the
spoke
things.
just as much as I did.
Those are the things that I want staff to provide. That's how I. Well, Councillor Luberts, I guess maybe you should just figure out how to ask the question.
Okay, Councillor Brady, I just, I think I just gave
Thank you for the
demotion.
demotion. Might I ask two questions of council? One is, and I think that's easy enough, you would like, I'm gathering the concept that you'd like this to be referred to as a large zoning bylaw amendment, so therefore it will come back with a report. If you could give us direction on that, then I think once we had that direction, then you could probably give us some other pointers that you might want back in the further report.
Just to a question on that, though, that then the cost to the applicant is going to be approximately $4,000 more?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know, does anybody want to, okay, the deferral motion is still on the floor. I'm not saying we're necessary, I don't think that the deferral, or the referral, is indicating that they want it to go to a major variance.
I don't think it changed, I don't think it would change staff's views. So we've got the recommendation report. We now want additional information.
So again, Mr. Brady, we're not asking for the basis to be changed. We're just asking you to collect more information so we can make an informed decision.
Thank you. That's helpful. Perhaps you would itemize the information that you'd like brought back to you in an information report.
I will ask, I think this is okay. We can ask council to let Mr. Brady know what questions you may have, and have opportunity for Mr. Lupertz, Councilor Lupertz, to contact the BIA. So all those, you can let Mr. Brady know before it comes back. I don't think we need to know it tonight. I'm sure the two councilors not here may also have questions. I think that's
that would be
fair.
adequate. If you would email me, that would be terrific.
Okay, so the referral is now on the floor. All those in favor? All those against? I'm in favor. So the report is now referred back. That brings us to new business inquiries. Councilor Luberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just want to get some clarification on what happened down at the Burley Road, the end of Burley Road. The access down there has been basically denied to the public, and they're being told that that they can use another entrance into the beach. And
I'm not sure why everybody's leaving, because the person who'll answer that could answer that question, I don't think is here anymore.
No. Maybe the CAO can
And
answer the question.
neither is Ms. Dolch.
I'll take that question.
Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Luberts, it's the access at the end of Birdie Road. I'm not following you about Burley Road.
There's a sign up there
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
There's a sign up there at the end of Burley Road now that says that this is an unimproved road allowance. The sign was never there before. There was always, people always were allowed to access the waterfront from Burley Road. And now they're being told, well, you can go down 200 meters down the road, there's another access. But Madam Chair, the problem with that access is if you want to go down to the end of Burley Road, if you go down to Maple Leaf, right, and you try to get to Burley Road, you got to have hip waders because you got to walk in the water. And I was down there yesterday, and I took a look at what the problem is down. And I understand what happened down there. There was construction, and people were using private property to get down to the beach because it was easier. But if that private property wasn't being used, then we would have went in there and made that road allowance accessible to the water's front, to the water's edge. And looking at what's there, it wouldn't take much for our staff to go in there and make it accessible. I see that the residents have gone in there with some of their own equipment and made some kind of a path that's a little bit better than what was there next to the private on the east side. But when I was on the west side yesterday, I looked, there's a culvert there, and that culvert, it looks like, and it's evident that when the water is draining through there, it's washing out the base. And there's probably maybe a 3-foot washout on the east side. And I can see that it's only a matter of time before it starts to erode the neighboring property, right? And I'm thinking that they could probably fill that in with some riprap, heavy stone, and put a 10-foot extension onto that existing culvert, and then address it with some 3/4-inch stone. And then we would have a proper access. But I don't think that we should be shutting it off to the public. And I would like to make a motion tonight that we ask staff to go in there and make Burley Road accessible to the public.
Okay, I hear your motion, but I think perhaps Mr. Brady or Ms. Welch is now walking out. Mr. Brady can address it. You missed the beginning of this.
I think I've got the gist.
Okay.
So we've looked at this particular road allowance. Actually, Infrastructure Services have taken a look at this particular road allowance, and it's quite expensive to try to put together a series of steps or something to go down and into this area. But what's important to note is that just a little further down the street, there's a perfectly acceptable way to access this part of Lake Erie. And we've put up a new sign that directs people to the access which exists, and that access will be upgraded this fall by our facilities management staff. They'll go in, and there's a few weeds in there that need to be cut down, but it's fully accessible as it sits at the present time. And more importantly, that new access has the ability to, over time, to become fully accessible. This doesn't have, it really doesn't have that. I mean, trying to put a ramp down the end of this road and making it accessible in a fully accessible way, I can't conceive how it could be possible. So if council wants to direct staff to do anything with the end of this particular road, I think it might be useful to ask Infrastructure Services to come back with a report saying what would be required to make this accessible. And that wouldn't be fully accessible. That would be somewhat accessible. And then once you have an idea on what that cost is, then perhaps you would be in a good position to judge whether or not it was warranted.
Councilor Lubert, does that make sense to you to perhaps direct your inquiry to infrastructure to see what the cost would be to fix the path that you were talking about?
Well, I mean, I already know that what's going to come back is it's going to be very expensive, and that's something that I would disagree with Mr. Brady, that it would be very expensive to make it accessible, right? We could go in there with some riprap, heavy rock, and put an extension on the culvert that's there now on the west side, and we could make a slope down on. We don't have to have fancy stairs. We have all kinds of access points along the lake and all the road allowances, and they're sloped. There's different ways to get down there. They're not all full of steps. And you know, I can remember years ago when Mayor Redekop first ran for mayor, he told everybody in this town that waterfront is our birthright. And I think that our birthright is for every access point, not just one or two, or because one gets a little bit eroded. And Mr. Brady wasn't here when I said, if you go down to Maple Leaf and you access down at Maple Leaf, you can't get to Burley Road because it's all water. You would have to have boots or hip waders on. But you can get down to the water's edge and walk along the shoreline at Burley Road. And so we need to accommodate the residents of this town and make sure that they have access to our waterfront. I've gone through neighborhood plans, and that's what we all ask for. We want access to the waterfront, not one or two accesses. Our road allowances should provide us. In Crystal Beach neighborhood plan, we called them windows to the lake, and every one of them was included.
Councilor Lucas, I don't think anyone's saying not to do it. They're saying trying to get a cost from infrastructure, what it would cost to.
Yes, but just keep in mind, we're not looking for something that's gonna cost $500,000. We're looking at throwing some stone in there, extending the culvert maybe 10 feet so that we can put a slope in there. That wouldn't cost us any more than $15,000, maybe $20,000. And I think our residents are worth spending money on.
Thank you, Councilor Lupertz. Mayor Redekop, you had your hand up.
Is there a motion on the floor?
The reports, well, he has a question under new business inquiries.
I put a motion on the floor to direct
Oh, yes, you
staff
did.
to
Yes,
make
I'm
Burley
sorry.
road allowance accessible.
I'm sorry, yes, you did.
So I'm quite in favor of people having access to the lake, and Councillor Lubert's memory is quite correct. I believe that the waterfront is our birthright. But I'm not going to support something if I don't have some indication of what the alternatives are and what the alternative costs might be, and I think our staff can provide that to us. When we were elected in 2014, one of the road allowances that was supposed to be opened was at the end of Holloway Bay Road. I have no idea what the cost of that would be, but I know that it would be a significant cost. And so I think we need to at least have an understanding of what the cost is. I agree that this is a busy area and lots of people want to get down to the water. And right now, while the lake is high, it's difficult to get over to Burley Road from the point of access that people have been directed to. But I'd like first and foremost to get an understanding of what the alternatives are and what the cost might be before I would say yes. So I won't support this particular motion, but if Councillor Lubertz wants to make it that staff provide a report as to the alternatives to open the Burley Road access to the water and provide us with the costs, I'd support that.
Councilor Lupertz?
Well, yeah, Madam Chair, you asked if there was a motion on the floor. I said, yes, there was. But if the mayor would like to make an amendment to that motion, that's fine. If you want to find out what the costs are and all the others, that's fine too. But I just want staff to know that I'm not looking, I know it's not going to be more than $50,000. So if they're thinking of doing something and telling us it's going to be $100,000,
Anyway,
and Mayor Redekop, you can laugh all you like
Okay,
while
Councilor
I'm
Lupertz,
talking.
let's
That's
get-
fine.
Okay, so
But I find it
would,
insulting when you're laughing while I'm talking.
So you've gone from 15,000 to 20,000 to 50,000.
No, I'm
And
just
you- and-
saying,
and
in
you-
my
yeah.
opinion, it would be
That's-
15 or 20,000.
Point of order.
10 or
I think
50,
Councilor
whatever.
Noyes is the chair.
okay, I'm going to bring it back to the motion. I think we understand your motion. I'm wondering if Mayor Redekop would you consider that a friendly amendment to your motion?
Yes, I could
Well,
handle that.
If I might, Madam Chair, it's not an amendment. His motion is that staff be directed to do the work. I'm saying let's find out what the alternatives are and what the costs are before we direct them to do anything. So they're really contradictory.
Okay.
Madam
so-
Chair, I'll change my motion for staff to give us some price on what it would cost
And alternatives?
and give us some alternatives.
Okay,
But Maple Leaf is not an alternative in my book.
okay, are we all clear on what's on the floor, Mayor Redekop?
So when I was talking about alternatives, I meant alternative options for how the access could be done. So, it could be more expensive, it could be a bit more streamlined, as you had suggested. So that's what I was thinking in terms of alternatives.
So just to clarify, Mayor Redekop, you weren't considering an alternative, another way that you could go down, over and back?
I just want to focus on this particular
Okay.
road allowance.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure Mr. Brady was clear on what the alternatives we were asking for. Okay, the motion as changed by Councillor Lubertz is now on the floor. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those against? I'm in favor. So, any business inquiries? Seeing none, that brings us to the business status report. Seeing none, Planning and Development Services is now closed, so I'm going to turn it back to the mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Noyes. And that takes us into Infrastructure Services, and Councillor Luberts, are you the chair now?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Radikoff. Infrastructure Services now in session. We have no presentations or delegations. And our first report is IS 26-2019, award of tender for Crystal Beach Drive water main and road reconstruction. Any comments or questions? Or mover? Councilor Mayor Redekop, any comments or questions? Being none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That brings us to new business and inquiries. Any new business? Councilor Noyes?
Thank you, Councillor Ruperts. There is a work order, I understand, for weed control off of River Trail on the new subdivision there. And I understand the work order date is August the 19th for the control of weeds. And I went there this weekend, and I would not want to live by these hills with all the weeds on them. These poor residents have been living there for about 5 to 6 years dealing with that. So my question is, August the 19th is the date that the work order has to be done. My question is, okay, so nothing happens. What would be the timeline for the town then to do what they need to do to cut down the weeds if the developer doesn't do that?
Our Acting Director of Infrastructure. Do you have any comments? Or do you know any timelines?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know any timelines. Truthfully, I'm not familiar with the issue. If I understand correctly, these are on the mounds of topsoil within the development.
All right.
Through the chair to the councillor, what we'll do is, typically we don't do this by our own forces, so we'll get a price. We can get that price in the interim as we're waiting to see if the work gets completed or not. And then it's about the availability of the contractor. They're pretty quick to react. So to answer your question, I would guess within a week of August 19th.
Thank you very much. The residents will be very happy. The other question I have then is on River Trail, and I know we've talked about the stone and chip and the first application and all that. And I do appreciate that the staff and the two providers of, I keep calling them providers of services, that's what I call it when I work with people. The two contractors both and the town had a site visit, and that was a few weeks ago. Well, I went down, and I know that they've looked at some areas that need to be improved before the second application goes on. But I went down there yesterday, and even in the last 3 weeks, there'd been a significant deterioration in certain section of that road that may not have been there when the site plan was done a few weeks ago. And it's particularly where River Trail abuts the adjoining roads that are also tar and chip. And I'm just hoping that that perhaps gets another look. There's so much loose gravel there now, not particularly on the circle. The circle's not too bad but I think it's Teresa Drive, but I could be wrong. But there's a few abutting roads that also have the first application of tar and chip that are now pretty much just gravel. And I'm just hoping that somebody looks at that again before the next application goes on.
Yeah, I'll refer that to our Acting Director. Do we have we gone back and taken a second look over there on River Trail to make sure that everything's being addressed?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, we looked. It was a few weeks back. We've tendered this work and have the work set with the contractor. To Councillor Noyes, we will have another look at it. I know it's been a couple weeks since we've been down there, but yeah, we'll certainly take that information and take a look and see what we're dealing with, and hopefully find a solution to address what's happening out there.
I guess the question would be, is there a timeline as to when they're going to start working on or get back to working on River Trail. I mean, if Councilor Noyes is seeing that there's deterioration since we've been there, then if they go back and there's more deterioration, they would just automatically address the problems that are there, even if they're new.
Yeah, we would do that analysis and set up that work with them. They would not necessarily jump on that work and do it. They would want to work within their scope. But yeah, we'll take a look and see what we have out there and address it with them. I believe they're still a week to 2 weeks out from coming back, but we'll go out there and check it out tomorrow and have a look at what we have, and then work with the contractor as they prepare to come back and work in that site.
Okay, thank you. Any other inquiries? Seeing none, we'll move to the business status report. Any comments or questions? Mayor Redekop?
So in terms of the wayfinding Phase 1 tender, is that going to be coming before us in September?
I believe so, yes. Wayfinding?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is our intention, yes.
And we're going to be on course for the Highland Drive reconstruction Phase 2 as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we received yesterday the draft tender-ready documents. We were looking at them today. There's some small edits, but we're very close to getting that out for tender, yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other comments? Any other new inquiries? Seeing none, I'll hand the chair back over to you, Mayor Redekop.
Thank you very much, Councillor Luberts. That takes us then to scheduling of meetings. Aside from the fact that AMO starts next Sunday and runs to Wednesday, and Councillors Huguenot, Noyes, and me, the three happy travelers, in separate cars, I presume, we'll be attending and we'll be reporting to council what we find out. Are there any other meetings that we need to be aware of? Councillor Luberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Tomorrow, 6 o'clock at Crystal Beach Fire Hall, we have a BIA meeting.
That's what you said, 6
BIA.
o'clock?
6 o'clock, yeah.
Any other meetings? If not, would anyone like to move that we adjourn? Councillor McDermott. I think that motion was made for you. All those in favor? That is carried. So